The story begins as a boy named Sakura struggles walking on a tightrope. He thinks about how everyone sees him as trouble since he always gets into fights, and they even think he's cursed because of the way he looks. He ends up falling off the rope, and as he wakes up, he notes how he only cares about people who are strong. He goes into the town, where he sees a girl named Koto who's being harassed by a group of men, and she tries to leave, but one of them grabs her. Sakura interrupts them, so their leader swings at him, but he dodges his attack and easily defeats all of them. He wonders why they have the confidence to act like they're strong when they're so weak, and he tells them to remember his name. As he walks away, Koto thanks him for saving her, but he can't believe she's talking to him. His face turns red, and he explains that he only defeated the gang because they pissed him off. But she wonders if he's hungry, and even though he refuses to eat with her, she still takes him to her cafe. She realizes that he isn't from around there, since she hasn't seen him before, and she notes that outsiders don't usually visit the town. She reveals that until recently, the security of the town was a concern, because they always have problems with gangs. She wonders if he hates the food she made, since he isn't eating it, so he has a bite, and he finds it delicious. She notes that his appearance is strange, and he wonders if she has a problem with it, so she mentions that she just finds him amazing. He tells her most people find him gross, and they usually tell him to fix how he looks, but she notes that she's seen worse. He mentions how a person's appearance doesn't matter in a fight, and he reveals that the reason he came to the Furin High School was because it has the best fighters. He thinks it's the best place for him, since he only knows how to fight, and he plans to beat everyone to reach the top. But she teases him, telling him the reason he's wearing his uniform a day before school starts is because he's excited. He becomes embarrassed hearing this, and he explains he didn't have anything else to wear. There's an old man leaving the restaurant, and Sakura gives him his bag he left behind, so the old man gives him some sweets to thank him. He notes that everyone in the town is strange, because they're nice to him, even though he looks weird, and is wearing the uniform of a school filled with delinquents. Koto tells him he made the right choice by coming to Furin, but she mentions that he won't be able to defeat anyone from the school. So he becomes annoyed, and he tells her she doesn't know how strong he is. But she tells him the reason why he won't become the top dog is because he's alone, and he explains that he isn't so weak that he needs to rely on other people to win. But she mentions that she isn't talking about physical strength, telling him he'll understand what she means after he meets people from the school. After he leaves her shop, he runs into the gang that he beat earlier, and their boss reminds him that he told them to remember him. He explains that it's hard to forget him since he's wearing a wig and contacts, but he calls him disgusting after he realizes it's how he really looks. Sakura notes how it's the usual reaction people have after they see him, and the boss mentions he made a mistake by attacking them, but he punches him in the face again. He becomes angry because he knows how weird he looks, but he doesn't understand why everyone hates him, even though he didn't do anything to them. He attacks everyone, thinking he doesn't need anyone's help to become the strongest at Furin, because his strength is unmatched. But during the fight, one of them threatens to stab Koto, and he thinks Sakura won't be able to do anything if he keeps her hostage, but he quickly kicks him away. He continues to fight everyone, but he wonders why he's protecting her, because he knows that doing things for other people never ends well. One of them slashes his leg, and he realizes he's in trouble. He tells himself it's why he shouldn't be helping other people, but as he's about to get hit with a baseball bat, a Furin student named Hiragi suddenly comes to his rescue. 3 other students arrive, and they start beating up the gang, but Sakura doesn't understand why they saved him. One of the gang members tries to attack him, but Hiragi kicks him away, and he tells Sakura to get back. He mentions that he could have defeated them alone, but Hiragi notes that his group can't protect him if he keeps moving around. The locals start cheering for the Furin students, which confuses Sakura, so Koto reveals that Furin is the reason that the town is safe. She reveals that the Furin students put a notice board in front of the town, which warns everyone not to cause trouble, and the people started calling them the Bo-Furin, because they became the shield that protects them. Sakura can't believe that even though they're fighters, they're still loved by everyone. The people start praising him as well, but as an old lady tries to treat his wound, he yells at her to stop. Koto can tell that he didn't choose to be alone, and she tells him that the people need him. He explains that he doesn't want to get involved with anyone, but she isn't convinced, wondering why he saved her if he thinks that way. She mentions that she won't leave him, and he looks towards everyone as he realizes that he isn't alone. He suddenly lunges at the boss and kicks him in the face as he wonders if the people will stay with him. Sakura heads to Koto's shop while carrying an old woman named Sato, and he's angry that he had to carry her all the way. He tells her to get off, so she jumps off his back, but he's surprised that she can walk because she told him her hips were bothering her. But she thanks him, so he starts blushing and he prepares to leave. But Koto gives him a sandwich, asking him if he's excited about the school entrance ceremony, so he says that he isn't. But she explains that he should look forward to it because there are plenty of amazing people at Furin. A boy named Neri arrives, but he trips on the door and falls over. Sakura points out that his uniform still has the tag on, and seeing him struggle to take it off, Sakura can't believe he's also a student at Furin. Koto mentions they'll be in the same grade, and Neri wonders if Sakura is from out of town since he has never seen him before, but he notes that it doesn't matter where he comes from. He's surprised to see Sakura's appearance, and he thinks Neri will insult him, but he just wonders if his hair turned white because he's too stressed. He mentions how the students at Furin are protectors of the town, and everyone who enters the school has the same goal. He doesn't understand why an outsider like Sakura wants to go there, so he notes that his goal is to reach the top, but Neri tells him he shouldn't say things that will never happen, telling him that if he keeps thinking like that, he'll only end up going bald. He challenges Neri to a fight, but he ignores him and leaves, since he needs to patrol the town before the entrance ceremony. Sakura can't believe someone like him is also entering Furin because he looks like a loser. But Koto notes that she didn't think he'd judge a person based on their appearance, but he mentions that people who only care about style always chicken out in a fight. But she notes that if he only looks at something from one angle, he'll never be able to see its true shape. She tells him he's free to think anything he likes, but he shouldn't make assumptions about people without getting to know them. After he leaves, a bakery offers him food because they want to thank him for fighting against the gangsters. He tells them he isn't hungry, but they still give it to him anyway. As he keeps walking around town, he keeps getting things for free, and he thinks something's wrong with the people since they're being nice to him. But he remembers what Koto told him, and he realizes that he just made the assumption that everyone will always hate him. He's startled as a girl asks for his help, and we see Neri getting beaten by a group of men because he's stopped them from harassing the girl. As they're about to leave, he grabs onto their boss, who knocks him down, but Neri refuses to give up, and he holds onto him. He mentions that anyone who brings harm to the town will be punished by the Bofurin, but they just laugh at him, and the boss starts wailing on him, but he refuses to let go. The boss prepares to knock him out, but Sakura comes to his rescue, and he sends the man flying. They wonder if he came to save his friend, but he mentions that he just doesn't like weaklings who think they're strong. They rush towards him, and Neri thinks Sakura can't face them alone, but he instantly defeats all of them. Neri thinks he must be disappointed, because a loser like him is going to be at Furin, but Sakura just tells him to know his limits. Neri starts crying, and he reveals that when he was in middle school, he was bullied every day, but a student from Furin saved him. So he decided to go there, because he wanted to be cool like that guy. But Sakura mentions that he's already a weak fighter, so he shouldn't cry, because it makes him look even weaker, and he tells Neri he isn't lame. The girl he saved thanks both of them for their help, and Sakura prepares to leave, but Neri stops him, and he starts writing notes about him. But Sakura punches him, and tells him to stop, but he reveals that he enjoys gathering data on people he likes, which makes him blush. Sakura prepares to leave, but Neri offers to show him around the town, mentioning that even though he's no good in a fight, he can tell him everything he needs to know about the town and the people who live there. They head towards the school, and Sakura stops to have a snack, but Neri tells him to hurry, because they're almost late. As they reach the school, they go through the roll and realize they're in the same class. Neri is excited about their other classmates, but Sakura thinks it doesn't matter. Neri is shocked when he sees who else is in their class, and he begs Sakura to be nice to everyone, but it just annoys him. Neri explains that no one will trust him because he isn't from around there, so he needs to make everyone understand that he isn't their enemy. Sakura starts warming up since he doesn't know what awaits him in the class, but Neri tells him to listen to what he's saying because everyone in the school could turn against him in an instant, but he explains that he doesn't care because he plans to fight his way to the top, and as they enter the class, Neri is terrified as he realizes everyone is staring at them. One of the students named Suo steps up to meet Sakura, who prepares to fight him, and Neri apologizes on his behalf. But he just pats Sakura on the back and praises him for his fight yesterday. The rest of the students have no idea what he's talking about, so he tells them about how Sakura protected the people, which impresses everyone, and it makes him blush. They wonder why he came to the school, so he explains that his goal is to reach the top, which scares Neri, and he tries to convince everyone that Sakura isn't planning on beating them. A student named Kotaro suddenly throws a table, and Neri begs Sakura not to fight him because he's the most dangerous person in the school. He goes to punch Sakura, but he dodges his attack, and he's excited to fight because it's what he expected from the school. As they start to fight, Suo notes that Sakura made a mistake because he said he'd become the top dog in front of Kotaro. We learn that he's the only person who was so skillful that he was allowed to call himself a Bofurin before starting, and he's extremely loyal to the current top of the school. One of the boys tells Suo to stop them, or Sakura might lose his life, and he suddenly slips while dodging the attacks. But he still manages to kick Kotaro in the face, and Sakura mentions that he won't be defeated by someone who can't think for himself. Their fight is interrupted as they hear someone's voice from a speaker, which annoys Sakura, and he tells Kotaro to continue their fight, but he realizes that everyone's focused on the voice. He wonders who's speaking, and he realizes that it's the strongest person of Furin named Yumiya. He tells everyone to enjoy their youth, and Neri doesn't understand what he's talking about, which makes Kotaro angry. Yumiya mentions that the only rule in the school is that they need to protect the town, and he ends the announcement as Sakura wonders how strong he is, because everyone respects him. Suo thinks Sakura and Kotaro should make up, but Sakura notes that Kotaro attacked him first. Suo asks Kotaro what Yumiya will think if he learns about the incident, so Kotaro offers him a truce. The rest of the students grab Sakura, and they start praising him, which makes him realize that ever since he arrived there, everyone has been nice to him. A student named Takeshi tells everyone to go to the schoolyard, where Hiragi grabs Sakura and takes him away from everyone. He tells Sakura not to tell anyone that Koto was attacked, because it will cause trouble if everyone finds out she was involved. Hiragi puts his hand in his jacket, which makes Sakura think he's about to threaten him with something. But he just takes out his stomach medicine and mentions that if Sakura tells anyone about Koto, he'll start coughing up blood. Neri wonders what they talked about, and Sakura mentions that Hiragi is an idiot who takes stomach medicine. But as Neri starts writing it down, Sakura asks him why he's doing that, so he reveals that Hiragi is one of the 4 kings of Furin. He explains that each king has a class under them, and the classes are named after the 4 devas of Buddhism. We learn that they belong to the first class, which is known as the Taman Squad. Hiragi orders everyone to split into groups of 4 or 5, with each one having a 2nd or 3rd year student who will serve as their leader. After that, they patrol the town, and Sakura wonders why Kotaro is in his group, so Hiragi reveals that Yumiya told him to keep an eye on them. Sakura wonders why they're just walking around town, and he thinks they should beat up the people who might cause harm. But Hiragi notes that by just walking in their uniform, they can scare away the smaller gangs. He explains that they should only fight when they're attacked, and he mentions that they should never attack first. Sakura finds it boring, and he becomes annoyed as they help an old lady paint a wall. Hiragi mentions that he understands why Sakura only finds fun in fighting, because they used to be like him, but he mentions that helping people is also fun. After that, they go to the train tracks, where Sakura sees a marking, which he finds ugly, but Neri notes that he shouldn't say that, because it's the mark of another team called the Lion's Head. He reveals that the tracks are like a border between the Bofurin and the Lion's Head, and he tells Sakura to never cause trouble beyond the tracks. He explains that the other side is the Lion's Head's territory, where they have their own rules, but they suddenly see a student from Furin being chased. Hiragi thinks he won't make it, but they're shocked as Sakura and Kotaro jump in to save him, and they knock out one of the Lion's Head members. But Sakura is confused when the other 2 make fun of their friend for getting knocked out. Their second in command named Tagami arrives, but he's surprised to see that one of them has been knocked out. Hiragi tells him they were chasing a Furin student, but Sakura finds Tagami annoying because he's too laid back. The boy who got knocked out wakes up, and he yells at them for breaking the rules, but Tagami starts beating him up. Hiragi tells him to stop since they should be on the same team, but Tagami takes the boy's jacket and notes that they have no need for the weak, but Sakura calls him lame because he doesn't think beating up the weak shows strength, and he mentions that he's disappointed because he thought he had found an interesting group. Tagami decides to leave him be for the time being, but he mentions that he'll beat him in a proper venue. After he leaves, Nier yells at Sakura and Kotaro since their actions have started a war. He thinks that if Sakura didn't provoke Tagami, things might have calmed down, but they take the boy who was being chased named Sasaki, and they tell him to report to Yumiya. Sakura realizes that Hiragi is nervous, so he wonders how strong Yumiya is, but he's surprised to see him acting like a kid. Hiragi mentions that they have a problem, and Yumiya says that he already knows, but he thinks he's talking about seedlings. Hiragi is annoyed because Yumiya isn't listening to him, and Sakura recalls that he was relaxed during the broadcast, but just his voice was enough to change the mood. Sasaki tells everyone how he ended up in the Lion's Head territory, telling them he was chasing a shoplifter. So he apologizes for his actions, since it sparked a clash between the two groups, and he starts to cry. But Yumiya thanks him, telling him he was just trying to protect the town, so there's no need for him to apologize. Yumiya learns about how Sakura and Kotaro attacked the Lion's Head, so he starts laughing, and Sakura explains that he got involved because they were beating up the weak. Yumiya pats him on the head, and as he praises Sakura for his action, he realizes that everyone follows Yumiya because he makes them feel safe. The leader of the Lion's Head named Tomiyama arrives in front of Furin while dragging one of their students, and he challenges them to a fight. Yumiya goes to meet him, and everyone follows him, but he tells them to stay back. Sakura notes that he'll fight as well, but Yumiya mentions that he won't repeat himself, and Sakura can't believe he's the same person from a moment ago. Tomiyama is excited to fight Yumiya, and he explains that Furin was the one to attack them first, so he's just responding to their actions. Yumiya notes that he has already done enough, since he beat up a lot of their students. So he tells Tomiyama to go back, but he tries to kick Yumiya, who blocks his attack. Yumiya wonders why he's so eager to fight, so he mentions that he's been bored ever since he became the leader. He notes that even though Yumiya is also in the same position, he's always having fun, and Tomiyama thinks it's unfair, so he wants to take over Furin. The other members of the Lion's Head arrive, and Tagami tells Tomiyama that attacking them on his own won't achieve anything. But he gets annoyed, since he was about to duel Yumiya, but Tagami mentions that it won't be possible, since everyone in Furin is watching them from inside the building. Yumiya orders everyone to stay put, and he notes that he's willing to fight Tomiyama in a duel, if he tells his men they can't interfere. He accepts Yumiya's offer, but Tagami thinks they should fight another time, since it's getting dark, and if they fight at night, nobody will be able to see their faces getting smashed. Tomiyama mentions that since they're all involved, they should hold multiple matches, and the team that wins will take over the other. Yumiya thinks that only they should have a duel, but Sakura and the others also want to fight, so they agree on the matchups. After that, they go to have dinner at Koto's cafe, where Neri loses his mind, because if they lose the matches, the both Furin will cease to exist. But Koto mentions that stressing over things won't change anything, so she tells him to calm down and believe in his friends. After eating the food, Sakura prepares to leave, because Hiragi and Yumiya aren't showing up, so Neri mentions that they had to calm down all the Furin students who were ready to fight. They arrive at the cafe, and as Yumiya starts talking to Koto, Sakura's face starts turning red, and he wonders if she's his girlfriend. Yumiya tells him it's not the case, and he reveals that she's his sister, but she notes that it's not true. She reveals that they were raised in the same institution, so he started calling her his little sister, which surprises Sakura that she's so young. He thinks she's mature for her age, which makes Yumiya angry, and Hiragi tells Sakura it's why he told him never to tell anyone that she was in danger. As they're eating food, Hiragi thinks about the old Lion's Head, and Sakura wonders if they were different before, so he notes that they weren't as violent. He mentions that Tomiyama and Tagami were their symbols of strength, and he doesn't understand how they got to their present condition, but Yumiya believes it's because of Tomiyama. He tells Sakura he'll understand once he talks to them, and he reminds Yumiya that they will fight them, but he explains that fighting is just another form of talking. As they're about to leave, Sasaki thanks them for saving him, and wishes them the best of luck. The next day, as they head to the tracks, Sakura notes that it's the first time he's fighting for someone else, but he feels more unbeatable than ever. They meet the lion's head, and Tomiyama tells them to follow him. Sakura looks around, and he's surprised to see that the place is filled with bars, so Neri mentions that it's the biggest bar district. Sakura wonders why Neri is with them, because he isn't fighting, but he notes that he's a member of the Bofurin, so he needs to at least protect himself, which is why he wants to learn from them. They arrive at the lion's head's base, and Neri mentions that it's an old shutdown theater called the Orion, but they renamed it to the Ori, which means cage. Tomiyama leads them to the stage, where they'll be fighting in front of an audience, and as Neri becomes scared, Sakura tells him to look forward if he wants to learn. Yumiya mentions that the main event is his fight with Tomiyama, and the result of the other matches don't matter, but Sakura is determined to win no matter what. Tomiyama is excited to fight Yumiya, but Tagami notes that they can't begin with them fighting. One of their members named Arima decides to go first, because he's angry that Kotaro has been staring at him. Sakura tells Kotaro that they haven't finished their fight, but he doesn't want to fight someone who has already lost, so he tells Kotaro to win his match. Neri takes out his notebook to see what information he has on Arima, and he realizes that he's a power-type fighter who can destroy his opponent's ribs with just one punch. Suo notes that Kotaro is just like him, but Yumiya tells him he shouldn't lump them together. As the fight is about to begin, Arima distracts Kotaro by acting like something happened to Yumiya, and he uses the opportunity to punch him in the face, but Kotaro just takes it. He grabs Arima's face and smashes him to the ground, winning the match in an instant. Tomiyama is amazed by Kotaro and wants to fight him next, but Tagami tells him to sit down and wait for his turn. Sakura notes that he isn't surprised by the result, since he knows how sturdy Kotaro is, but Suo teases him that it means he respects him. Tomiyama orders his men to remove Arima from the stage, but they just throw him off and insult him for losing the match. Sakura calls them weaklings, telling them they should never say strength is everything, but Suo thinks he shouldn't waste his breath on them because they won't understand anything until they're hit. Sakura wants to fight next, but Suo mentions that it's his turn, and his opponent is a lion's head member named Minoru. Suo notes that he thought Sakura was stupid when he said his goal was to become the top dog, but he's proved him wrong through his actions. As he goes to fight, Sakura asks Neri what he knows about him, and he notes that even though Suo is famous for his strength, there's no information on who he's defeated. Yumiya mentions that he also didn't know anything about him, but after meeting him, he realized that Suo is a nice guy. As the fight is about to begin, Suo sees that Minoru is angry since Arima was defeated. He reveals that he's mad because he's been with Arima since he was a child, but Suo calls him a kid who throws a tantrum when something doesn't go his way. He rushes towards Suo and tries to punch him, but he easily avoids it. Minoru thinks he just needs to be faster, so he tries attacking again, but he gets thrown to the ground. He asks Minoru if he knows what's needed to be an adult, but he tells Suo to stop saying weird things. He tries to hit Suo again, but the result is the same, and Neri is amazed, because it looks like Minoru is falling on his own. The rest of the Lion's Head members get angry, telling him to take the fight seriously, but he's already fighting with everything he's got. Yumiya realizes that Suo isn't just a nice guy, but Sakura calls him rotten, because he's embarrassing a weak opponent instead of simply defeating them. He wonders what it would take to make him fight seriously, and Suo keeps playing around with Minoru, asking him if he has thought of an answer to his question. Suo knows that he's imagining himself in the same position as the boy he made fun of for being defeated. He mentions that it's the answer to what's needed to become an adult, and he notes that he'll turn his thoughts into reality. But as he's about to attack Minoru, Tagami tells him to stop, because the match is already over, and he mentions that Minoru isn't one of them anymore. As Suo walks off, he tells Minoru that being an adult means being considerate to others, and he congratulates him for taking the first step to adulthood. Yumiya praises Suo for his victory, and Neri wonders what technique he was using, but he explains that he doesn't know, because his master was self-taught. Hiragi notes that he didn't think he could be so emotional, and he's embarrassed because he isn't usually like that, but Sakura's personality has rubbed off on him. He tells Suo he shouldn't blame him for his actions, and he notes that Suo needs to be serious when they eventually fight, but he doesn't want to do that. Minoru drags Arima out of the way, and as he wakes up, he realizes that Minoru also lost his match. After that, Sakura prepares to fight in the next match, but a boy named Seiko stands up and points at Hiragi. He tells Sakura he needs to wait if he wants to fight Tagami, and he mentions that he'd usually be the one to face him. Sakura is annoyed because Hiragi doesn't seem to think he can win against Tagami, but Hiragi tells him he believes in him. As he goes to the stage, Neri wonders if he knows Seiko, and Yumiya mentions that even though Hiragi doesn't talk much about himself, he knows people outside of Furin. Tagami notes that he didn't think Seiko would ever ask for a one-on-one fight, which makes him wonder if something happened between him and Hiragi, but he refuses to answer. Hiragi mentions that it was inevitable that they would fight each other, but he mentions that he will be the one to win. Seiko rushes towards him, but as Hiragi blocks all of his attacks, he thinks Hiragi is still looking down on him, and he mentions that he has changed. He once again attacks Hiragi, and Neri is shocked to see that he's on the defensive, while Tagami is impressed by how good of a fighter Seiko is. But Tomiyama notes that it's not surprising, since Seiko is one of his best fighters. Tagami mentions that he can't tell what Seiko is thinking, but he knows that Seiko has fought more than anyone. Tomiyama mentions that he doesn't usually talk much, and Tagami notes that the fact he's talking to Hiragi shows how much he thinks of him. He analyzes how Hiragi is fighting, and Hiragi blocks one of his punches, but he still gets knocked back. Seiko thinks he hasn't changed at all, and he mentions that Seiko has become a talker because he was always quiet in the past. He kicks Hiragi, sending him flying, and he thinks Hiragi has gotten weaker because of his friends. Sakura yells at him, telling him Seiko is looking down on them because of him, but Suo laughs at Sakura, since he's starting to care about his friends. He explains that he's only angry because Seiko is making fun of them, but Yumiya tells him to calm down. Hiragi stands up like nothing happened, and tries to smash Seiko to the ground, but he dodges the attack. He notes that Seiko has gotten way stronger than before, and he feels embarrassed that a first year like Sakura is yelling at him. So he takes his stomach medicine and prepares to fight seriously. As they clash with each other, everyone's shocked by how amazing the match is, and Sakura is amazed by Hiragi's strength. Suo tells him that Furin's 4 kings earn their name, so everyone already knows how strong they are. Sakura thinks Hiragi should have acted like that from the beginning, but Suo thinks his words riled him up. Seiko and Hiragi appear to be evenly matched, but Tagami thinks Hiragi has the upper hand. He kicks Seiko in the face, and he can't believe Hiragi is still stronger than him, even though he has been living an easy life. We go to the past, where Seiko was bullied, but Hiragi comes to his rescue. Seiko wonders why he saved him, so he explains that he couldn't let them pick on the weak. He tells Seiko to stand up for himself, and he starts to cry, begging Hiragi to teach him how to fight. After that, he started following Hiragi, and as he's about to enter Furin, Seiko notes that Hiragi will become the top dog there, telling him he'll also go to Furin to help him. But Hiragi tells Seiko not to follow him, because he'll be working under Yumiya, so he won't be able to meet Seiko's expectations. After that, Tomiyama and Tagami find Seiko beating up a group of people, so they invite him to join their group, and he decides to go with them, because he wants to defeat Hiragi. We return to the present, as Seiko mentions that he can't afford to lose to Hiragi, but as he tries to attack him, Hiragi kicks him in the face. Seiko refuses to lose to someone who's satisfied to be under someone else, and as Hiragi blocks his punch, he apologizes since he couldn't meet his expectations. He punches Seiko in the stomach, and as he's about to pass out, he thinks Hiragi doesn't need to apologize, because he was just looking out for him, but Seiko still wishes he could have followed him. Everyone's shocked that Seiko lost, and Tagami orders his friends to get Seiko off the stage, but Hiragi tells them to stop, and he carries him off himself. Tagami prepares to remove Seiko's jacket, but Hiragi tells him to wait until after his match, and he notes that doing it won't make their team stronger. After he returns to his seat, he wonders if Yumiya will ask him about Seiko, but he mentions that he'll wait until Hiragi is ready to tell him on his own. Tagami spaces out as he thinks about his past, but Tomiyama tells him it's his turn to fight Sakura. The crowd starts cheering for him, and Yumiya tells Sakura to enjoy his conversation with Tagami. But he notes that excitement isn't the only thing he feels when fighting strong opponents, and he's eager to get the match started. But Tagami tells him he shouldn't be in such a hurry, and he mentions that he'll take his time to enjoy the fight. As the match begins, Sakura tries to punch Tagami, but he tackles him and throws him to the ground. He tries to hit Sakura while he's down, but Sakura kicks away his arm and quickly gets back up. Hiragi knows that Sakura is a skilled fighter, but his opponent is the second in command of the Lion's Head. He mentions that for someone who said he'll take his time, Tagami is moving pretty fast, but he notes that he's still taking it easy. He rushes towards Sakura, and Neri realizes that Sakura is having trouble dodging the attacks. Yumiya notes that he and Tomiyama have been at the top of the lion's head for a while, so Tagami is on a completely different level compared to the last 3 fighters. Sakura manages to land a hit, but Tagami grabs his leg and makes him fall to the ground. He tries to stomp Sakura, but he manages to dodge it, and Tagami reveals that he was angry because Sakura called him lame the first time they met. Sakura tries to take him down, but he just smashes him into the ground, and he mocks him for being defeated so easily. He notes that only the strong can get away with running their mouth, and he thinks Sakura only feels cool because the people around him are strong. But Sakura becomes angry, and he starts attacking relentlessly. He starts to land hits on him, as he notes that if Tagami really thinks of him like that, he'll never be able to defeat him. Sakura thinks that if he defeats Tagami, it will prove that the dumb logic their group goes by is wrong. He kicks Tagami in the face, but he refuses to go down, and he lands a counterattack, which knocks Sakura down. Tagami tells him he doesn't know anything about the lion's head, and he mentions that everyone there is aiming to become stronger. He stomps Sakura's head, which makes everyone think the fight is over, but he still tries to get up, and he tells Tagami his actions don't match the words he's saying, and he notes that they should change their name to the Bully Club, because all they do is beat up the weak. Tagami wonders what he means, and he goes over to Arima and Minoru, asking them what they were doing in the tunnels, because he knows that Furin wouldn't trespass into their territory without a good reason. They tell him how they were chasing a middle schooler from Furin, so Tagami beats them up and takes their jackets. Tomiyama tells him to do that after he has finished his fight, so he gets back on stage and apologizes to Sakura for making him wait. In a flashback, we see Tagami fighting against the Lion's Head members, and as he defeats them on his own, it impresses Tomiyama, so he makes him join them. Tomiyama talks about how believing in strength alone means they can't give in to anyone, and Tagami mentions that he's been hearing that ever since he came there. After defeating another group on their own, Tomiyama and Tagami return to the Lion's Head. Tomiyama mentions that he and Tagami are racing to see who will become the strongest first. Tagami mentions that ever since they came to the Lion's Head, they've been told that they need to be strong if they want to be free, so they think the strongest person will also be the freest. Tagami thinks about how Tomiyama embodies what it means to be a Lion's Head member, so he thinks that if Tomiyama becomes the leader, they'll be even better than before. But after Tomiyama becomes the leader, he tells Tagami that he thought being the strongest would make him free from everything, but he just finds it boring. He notes that every member of the Lion's Head should be as strong as him, and Tagami thinks he's planning to train them. There are a few members that rush over, and their leader mentions that a rival gang attacked one of them. But Tomiyama kicks him and takes his jacket, telling him there's no place for the weak in their group. Tagami doesn't understand what he's thinking, but Tomiyama reminds him that he's the leader, so he makes the rules. Tagami realizes that he's changed, but he still decides to help him remove the weak from their group. He tells Tomiyama to keep laughing with the others, but he hopes that his previous self will one day return. We return to the present, as Sakura kicks Tagami in the stomach, but he realizes that Tagami is holding back. Sakura thinks about how he picked a fight with Tagami because he thought he knew everything about him, but he doesn't understand why he beat up Arima and Minoru. Sakura asks him what his goal is and why he attacked his own members, so he mentions that the Lion's Head isn't a place for scum. He thinks about how he can't go back to his old self because he needs to keep carrying Tomiyama's mistake. But when he heard of Furin, he thought they could be the spark that could change the Lion's Head, which is why he dragged everyone into a fight. He tells Sakura he wants to go to the mountains, but Sakura tells him to stop daydreaming, and he plans to defeat Tagami to prove that he's lame, telling him that after he's defeated, he should start acting cooler so he can fight him again. He calls Sakura selfish, telling him he's bragging against someone who's much more skilled than him, but Sakura starts to attack him as he mentions that no matter how strong his opponent is, he'll never back down. He mentions that he'll never change, which makes Tagami think about his past, and as he spaces out, Sakura lands a kick on him. Tagami punches his face, which makes him smile, and he reveals that he knew Tagami wasn't fighting at full strength, so he decides to give it his all. As they start clashing, everyone's shocked to see that they're smiling, even though they're both getting hit. Suo is amazed by Sakura, while Miri starts crying, and Hiragi mentions that he didn't think Sakura was such an amazing fighter. Sakura never thought he would have so much fun fighting someone like Tagami, and as he punches Sakura in the stomach, he's annoyed at how happy he looks. They both kick each other in the face, which knocks both of them down, but Tagami starts laughing because he didn't think fighting could be so much fun. As they get up, Tagami mentions that they've been fighting for a while, so it's time to end the fight. They rush towards each other, as Tagami remembers the time when Tomiyama beat up their own member for the first time, and he thinks that instead of going along with everything Tomiyama said, he should have fought him. As Sakura punches him in the face, he thinks about how Sakura will become even stronger, and he wishes he'll never change. Tagami falls to the ground and gives up the match, but everyone can't believe it because the Tagami they know would never give up. Sakura gets angry and he yells at Tagami because he let him win, but Tomiyama gets up on the stage and tells Yumiya that it's time for their fight. Sakura mentions that he isn't done yet, and Tagami tells Tomiyama to stop because they're the ones in the wrong, but Tomiyama kicks him away. Sakura gets angry and is about to punch him, but Yumiya holds him back, saying he will take care of him. As Sakura gets off stage, he doesn't understand why he's so angry, because he thought he was used to seeing people get beat up. Tomiyama is excited that it's his turn to fight, but Yumiya mentions that he needs to ask him something first, and he wonders if Tomiyama felt anything during the last fight. So he reveals that he didn't, and Yumiya thinks it's too bad for him, but Tomiyama has no idea what he's talking about. He thinks it's unfair that Furin has so many strong members, but everyone in the Lion's Head is weak, which prevents him from being free. He mentions how Yumiya is always having fun, so he believes that if he takes over Furin, he'll finally be free. Tomiyama rushes at him, and he manages to get on top of him, and he starts punching his head. He continues to have the upper hand in the fight, and Suo is shocked by his movement, so Hiragi notes that it's how he became the youngest ever leader of the Lion's Head. Sakura realizes that if Yumiya hadn't stopped him, he would have ended up in a worse condition than Tagami, so he vows to become stronger. Yumiya mentions that things won't get better for Tomiyama if he keeps thinking about things that never happened, but Tomiyama tells him his words don't make sense. He jumps towards Yumiya, but he decides to step back, seeing that Yumiya is about to attack him. He dodges his punch, but he still starts bleeding, and Yumiya tells him if he doesn't understand what he's saying, he won't win the match. As the fight continues, Tomiyama lands hits on Yumiya, which impresses everyone. He manages to get behind Yumiya and kicks him in the back, but he isn't fazed by it, so he becomes confused, because even though he's hitting Yumiya, he doesn't seem affected by it, and Yumiya notes that his punches are light, because there's nothing behind them. Tomiyama thinks it doesn't matter, because Yumiya will ultimately fall if he keeps getting hit, telling him he won't stop until he begs for mercy. He sweeps his legs and lands a solid uppercut, but he still smashes Tomiyama to the ground, telling him he doesn't feel anything from his punches. But Tomiyama gets up and tells Yumiya he shouldn't get in the way of his freedom. So he asks him what freedom means to him, and Tomiyama mentions that he feels free when having fun. He notes that fighting strong opponents like Yumiya is fun for him, but Yumiya mentions that it doesn't look like he's having fun. He explains that Tomiyama doesn't even know about himself, and he's always thinking about hypothetical scenarios, which is why he's always unsatisfied. So Yumiya feels sorry for him, but he feels even worse for the other members of the Lion's Head, who have him as their leader. He gets angry and tries to attack Yumiya, but he dodges all of his attacks and punches him in the face. Tomiyama starts losing his mind, and he mentions that he doesn't need anything. He wonders when he started feeling unsatisfied with everything, and he doesn't know what he's missing. But he thinks it won't make any difference to him in his current situation, so he convinces himself that he doesn't need anything. He lets out a scream and starts beating Yumiya up, but he refuses to fight back and lets Tomiyama hit him. Sakura yells at him since he's doing nothing, but Kotaro tells him to just watch. Yumiya apologizes to Tomiyama for backing him into a corner, but tells him that if he keeps destroying everything around him, his situation will never change. He bites Yumiya's neck, but he just hugs him and tells him the answer he's looking for is inside him. Yumiya tells him to remember the time Furin and the Lion's Head got into a fight, and he notes that at that time, his punches had more weight behind them. Tomiyama gets scared as Yumiya approaches him, but he just grabs his head and tells him to remember what he was feeling back then because it's what he needs. He knocks Tomiyama out with a devastating headbutt, and we go back to when Tomiyama wasn't the leader of the Lion's Head. As they go to fight another group, Tomiyama is distracted by a cat, so the rest of them tell him to get serious if he wants to become their leader. He asks them who they'll fight, which makes them laugh, and he wishes that things would remain the same forever. Everyone around him suddenly disappears, and as the ground shatters, he realizes that he's in a dream. As he wakes up, he notices that Tagami is sad, so he realizes that he lost the fight against Yumiya. He tells Tagami about his dream, and it made him understand that the only way for him to have fun is when everyone around him is happy, so he tells Tagami to smile. Tagami apologizes to him for leaving his side when he knew he was hurting, and he mentions that he hated seeing everyone despise Tomiyama. So he decided to follow his rules, because his dream was for Tomiyama to be loved by everyone. He mentions that he should have confronted him instead of just looking away, so he apologizes for his mistakes, because it took away the things Tomiyama needed the most. Tomiyama thought that after he became the leader, he would have the most fun in his life, but after he reached that goal, he didn't find what he was looking for. He didn't know what to do, because everything he did made him bored, so he started to blame his team. He tells Tagami he isn't responsible for anything that happened to him, because it's his fault for throwing away everything he had. He calls himself an idiot, since he didn't realize he already had everything he needed, and he thanks Tagami, because there would be nothing left if it wasn't for him. Tomiyama takes off his jacket, and gives it to Yumiya, because he lost the match. Tomiyama tells him he's the new leader of the Lion's Head, and he asks him to take care of everyone. But Yumiya refuses to accept it, and he mentions that Tomiyama was the one who put their teams on the line, but he never wanted to take over the Lion's Head. He thinks they should all be friends, which makes Tomiyama laugh, thinking Yumiya is an interesting guy. After that, Yumiya asks Tagami if he knows a place where they can get food, saying they will have an after-party. As they get the food, Neri is surprised to see that they still have an appetite, while Sakura doesn't understand how Yumiya can eat with the person he was fighting. He thinks he can't even call their match a fight, and he wonders how Yumiya can forgive Tomiyama, because he knows he can't do it. Yumiya wonders if something's wrong with Tagami, because he hasn't touched his food, but he suddenly apologizes to all of them, since the whole situation was his fault. Tomiyama admits that it's also his fault, and Yumiya asks Sakura what they should do to him. So he tells them to promise that they'll become cool, and never do something so lame again, which surprises Tagami. Yumiya notes that the matter is settled, and he goes back to eating, but Tomiyama wonders how he can have so much fun, even though he's the top dog at Furin. He mentions that he just loves eating, which confuses everyone, and Tomiyama tells him he loves to eat as well. Yumiya notes that he isn't into food that much, but he enjoys having a good time with everyone else. He explains that it makes everything else seem unimportant, and it has nothing to do with him being the leader. Tomiyama mentions that he also had fun with everyone else before he took over as the leader, and he thought he would get to laugh with them even more. He wonders why he didn't notice it at that time, and Yumiya is happy for him, because he was able to notice it before he lost everything. He wonders if Yumiya knows why he became the top dog, and he mentions that it's because he wants to have fun eating with everyone all the time. He notes that he became Furin's leader, because he wants to make everyone in the town happy, saying if there was a better way of achieving that, he would have done that instead. Tomiyama is amazed that he understood himself even before he became the top dog, but he mentions that everyone made him their leader. He notes that they agreed with his wishes, and helped make it a reality, so after he became their leader, he realized that his wishes weren't his alone. He wants to make sure everyone's wishes become reality, no matter how hard it is, which is why he'll never lose to anyone. Tomiyama realizes that Yumiya is carrying everyone on his back, and his punches were light, because he was only fighting for himself. As Sakura and the others are about to leave, Yumiya invites Tomiyama and Tagami to hang out with them, and he gives Tomiyama a piece of bread from their area. As they leave, Tomiyama mentions that he doesn't know what he can do to make up for everything he did, but he still needs everyone. Tagami notes that he also wants to set everything straight, and he doesn't know what he can do except for apologizing to everyone. But he knows that he needs to face them, and he tells Tomiyama they should look for the answer together. Tomiyama starts laughing after eating the bread, and he wonders what a fresh piece would taste like. So Tagami realizes that he has returned to his old self, and he starts crying. As Yumiya and the others return to Koto's shop, Sasaki asks them what happened in the fight, but Yumiya tells him it's all over, which makes him cry. Koto welcomes everyone back, but as Sakura is about to leave, Yumiya picks him up, telling him they need to celebrate because it's a memorable day. Sakura thinks there's nothing to celebrate, so he tells Yumiya to stay there on his own, but he explains that he needs to talk to Sakura. Yumiya asks him about the conversation he had with Tagami through their fight, and Sakura mentions that he didn't hear anything from his fists. Yumiya laughs at him because he didn't think Sakura was such a straightforward person. He notes that what he wanted to tell him was that a person can express their thoughts through fighting. But as he mentions that they can even reveal what they love and hate, Sakura suddenly spits his coffee at Yumiya, but he just wipes it off. He notes that Sakura came to like Tagami by the end of their fight because he was about to hit Tomiyama for attacking him, but he still thinks there's no reason to celebrate. So Yumiya tells him he's happy for him because he wondered what kind of person Sakura was when he moved into their town. But after getting to know him, Yumiya realized that he's a good person, so he's happy to have him in their group. Sakura asks him how he can accept everyone, and he notes that he came to defeat him so that he can become Furin's top dog. But he knows that he can't do that because he has never accepted anyone in his life. He notes that he has always tried to get strong on his own, but he realized that he needs other people's help, so he can never become Furin's leader. Niri reminds Sakura how he saved him on the first day they met, but he suddenly forgets what he was trying to say, so Suo tells him Sakura already got his message. Yumiya tells him the reason he was able to have a conversation with Tagami through fighting is because he wanted to know more about him. So if he can continue to do that, he can achieve anything. Sakura starts blushing, and he mentions that he'll need to defeat Yumiya to become the top dog. So Yumiya notes that he'll face that problem in the future, but Kotaro gets angry and tries to throw a chair at Sakura. The next day, as Sakura walks around town, he keeps remembering what Yumiya said to him, but he's startled as Niri and Suo suddenly appear. He wonders how long they've been standing there, and Niri notes that they've been trying to get his attention for quite a while. As they go to school, Suo tells Sakura that there's no need for him to be embarrassed, but he tells Suo to shut up, and Niri feels like everyone's staring at them. As they enter their class, everyone starts asking them about their fight with the lion's head, so Sakura and Suo tell them to get all the details from Niri. A boy named Taiga also wants to know the details, which surprises Niri, and he tells Sakura that even though Taiga is weird, he's just as strong as Kotaro and Suo. He asks Suo if he's ready to answer his question, but Suo notes that he already said no. Taiga turns his attention to Sakura, which makes him think he's about to attack him, but Taiga just asks him what his aesthetic is. Sakura is confused, since he doesn't know what Taiga is trying to say, so he explains that an aesthetic is how a person lives their life. Niri mentions that it's difficult to understand the true nature of a person through numbers, so he needs to know their thoughts as well. Taiga notes that they should all hang out after school, but everyone starts making excuses. Kotaro arrives in the class, but he just ignores Taiga, who mentions that he'll take them to his favorite place. Sakura and Suo also reject his offer, but Sakura changes his mind when Niri mentions that they'll have delicious food. Niri forces both of them to come with him to the restaurant, and as they arrive, Sakura doesn't think he can get a decent meal. But Taiga recommends a dish, which is both healthy and delicious, and Sakura is surprised that it looks good in the picture. Taiga challenges him to a fight, saying he thinks a person like him, who declared in front of everyone that he'll become the top dog, must have an aesthetic. Sakura remembers how Yumiya told him that he can get to know a person by fighting, so he accepts the challenge. Their classmate Kiryu arrives with a girl, and Sakura is surprised to see him holding her hand. Niri is excited, because 4 of the 5 strongest people in their class are at the restaurant, and Sakura wonders how strong Kiryu is. Niri mentions that when Kiryu was in his first year in middle school, he beat up third-year students from a delinquent school all on his own. Sakura wants to know more about him, but Niri wonders why his face is turning red. Taiga invites Kiryu to sit with them, telling him Sakura wants to know more about him. Kiryu refuses his offer, since he's busy, but Taiga goes to his table and continues to bother him. So Kiryu tells him to stop, and he notes that people get scared of him because of his size and appearance. Kiryu tells him if he continues to act like that, he'll never get a girl, and Niri thinks they're about to fight, but he's surprised as Taiga just apologizes to the girl for scaring her. They decide to leave, and Niri wonders if Kiryu's words got to Taiga, but he mentions that he doesn't like to accidentally scare people. They hear noise coming from outside the restaurant, where Kiryu has been surrounded by a group of people, so they ask him what's going on, and he reveals that he saw a girl being taken away, so he saved her, but he didn't expect the boy to return with his gang. Taiga calls him cool, saying his aesthetic is taking care of women, but he tells Taiga it isn't the time to talk about that. One of them tries to attack Taiga, but Sakura kicks him away, and he mentions that he hates people like them. As the fight begins, Taiga gets hit in the face and falls to the ground, which surprises Sakura. But he blocks the next attack and slams his opponent to the ground, revealing that he always allows his opponents to get a hit on him. Kiryu starts throwing people towards Sakura, which makes him annoyed, but he notes that it will end things more quickly. Neri wonders if he's doing that just for fun, but Suo doesn't think that's the case, and he tells Kiryu he doesn't need to worry about the girl's safety. One of the gangsters charges at Suo, but he throws him to the ground, which impresses Kiryu, but as he's distracted, two of them try to attack him from behind. Sakura kicks them away, and he tells Kiryu to keep throwing their opponents towards him because he realized that he was doing that to protect the girl. After they defeat everyone, Taiga tells Sakura to mention the Bofurin's creed, but Neri notes that Sakura doesn't know it since he's from out of town. So Taiga recites it instead, and Sakura recalls that Hiragi said the same thing when he first met him. Kiryu is amazed by how strong Sakura is, but Taiga thinks it's to be expected, since his goal is to reach the top. Kiryu tells Sakura to give him his number, but he doesn't know how. So Kiryu goes through his phone, which makes everyone laugh, because it's completely empty. The next day, as Sakura is eating at Koto's cafe, he's startled when she suddenly appears behind him, asking him why he's glued to his phone. She realizes that he's texting his friends, so she adds her contact info to his phone. Neri asks everyone when they're choosing their grade rep, and Sakura tries to ask them what that is, but he gets angry since it takes him too long to type a message. As he goes to his class, he yells at everyone and asks them what a grade rep is, so Suo tells him they were just about to explain that. Takeshi joins them with two other students, and Neri notes that they're the Taman Squad second-year grade rep and vice reps. Takeshi explains how the grade rep is responsible for everything that happens in their class, and he tells everyone to nominate a student. Sakura realizes that the grade rep is like the top dog of their class, so it should be someone like Yumiya, but he's shocked as Suo nominates him for the role. Everyone starts speaking in Sakura's favor, which makes him blush, and he tells them Kotaro would be a better fit for the job, but Suo mentions that he isn't interested in such things. Sakura wonders why they're all agreeing to him becoming the grade rep, even though he isn't from their town, but they think it doesn't matter. Suo notes that he and Neri will be vice reps, and he tells Sakura he should accept the position because everyone in the class trusts him. As he thinks about what to do, the second-year student named Ren starts yelling at them for taking too long to decide. But he begins speaking in a normal voice after someone takes off his headphones. He tells Sakura he'll be the grade rep because it's clear that everyone supports him, telling him he can leave the position in the future if he doesn't like it. Suo mentions that everyone will help him, and they tell him he shouldn't think so hard about it because even though he'll be the grade rep, he'll still be just another student in the class. Takeshi thinks Sakura should lead the class, but he doesn't know what to do, so Takeshi tells him to follow Ren on his town patrol and see what he does. As they go on the patrol, Neri tells Sakura he shouldn't stare too much at Ren because there's no telling what will make him angry. An old lady tells Ren her little girl Lisa has gone missing, so he tells her they'll take care of it, but they're shocked as he just tells his vice rep to handle the situation. Sakura can't believe he isn't doing anything, and Neri notes that he's worried about Lisa, so Sakura tells him they should look for her. Takeshi arrives there as he runs after a cat, and he reveals that it's the Lisa they're looking for. She quickly gets on a roof, and they're surprised to see how quickly Sakura does the same. He keeps running after her, and as she jumps into the river, Ren also jumps in to save her. After that, the old woman thanks Ren for his help, and he tells her she shouldn't lose Lisa again, because there's no guarantee they'll always find her. Sakura asks Ren what his reason was for becoming the grade rep, but he explains that he doesn't have one, and he mentions that everyone forced him to do it. So Sakura notes that if that's the case, he should just leave the position, but it makes him angry. Ren tells him that even though he depends on everyone else, they depend on him as well, so he'll do everything to make sure he doesn't let them down. Sakura asks Neri and Suo if the reason they voted for him to become the grade rep is because they rely on him, which makes them smile, and they tell him he can depend on them as well. The next day, as Sakura carries an old lady to Koto's shop, he falls to the ground, and Koto wonders if he had trouble sleeping since he has bags around his eyes. But he knows that he can't tell her that he was up all night, thinking about what to do as the grade rep. She asks him if they've selected the grade rep, which makes him spit up his coffee, and she realizes that he was chosen for it. He mentions that he doesn't know what to do, and as she gives him advice, he tells her it's none of her business. She tells him to learn the faces and names of everyone in the class, because calling someone by their name shows that he recognizes them. He realizes that he has never called a person by their name in his life, and she tells him to say her name, which makes him embarrassed. He runs away, so the old lady thinks he's shy, but Koto notes that he's afraid of getting close to people. In the class, Neri tells everyone's names to Sakura, and he doesn't think he can remember all of them. But Suo appreciates the fact that he's trying, because it shows them that he's taking the position of grade rep seriously. Neri sees an injured student named Anzai, and as he wonders what happened to him, Yumiya starts talking on the broadcast, telling the grade reps and vice reps to come to the roof. As they arrive, Takeshi tells them it's a meet and greet, but everyone already knows each other. Sakura is overwhelmed that he needs to remember their names as well, but Neri notes that he'll help him, so he shouldn't be worried. He's surprised that Neri knows all the reps and vice reps, so he mentions that since he can't help with fighting, he learned the faces and names of everyone in school to make Sakura's life easier. Suo mentions that he'll take on the role of their negotiator, because he's good at making people give in to his demands. As Yumiya arrives with a group of people, Sakura is annoyed that there are even more grade reps, but Neri reveals that they're Furin's 4 kings and their assistants. Before Yumiya talks about anything, he tells them the planting of the seedlings for the year is successful, and he thanks Kotaro for his help. Hiragi is annoyed, and he tells Yumiya to address everyone, so he bows in front of them, saying he'll be counting on them, because he can't achieve everything on his own. After that, a student named Matsumoto congratulates Sakura for being selected as the Taman squad's first-year grade rep. Sakura remembers that he was present on his first day, and Matsumoto mentions that he already knew they would select Sakura, but Hiragi tells him to stop lying. Yumiya notes that if Sakura and the others have any problems, they should ask their seniors for help, and he tells Ren to help them as well. But he thinks Sakura should try to solve most of his problems on his own, telling him he won't be of much help to him. After that, as they walk around town, they see a group of shady people who mention that they're looking for some Furin students, but they don't have any business with any of them, so they decide to leave. Suo reveals that they belong to a group called Keel, and he notes that he doesn't know much about them, but he mentions that they have a bad reputation. They hear a woman screaming, and as they go to see what's wrong, they find Anzai beaten up in an alley. He explains that he was running from a big dog, so he hid in the alley and passed out, but Sakura knows that he's lying. Anzai mentions that he's fine, and tries to leave, but Suo asks him if Keel did that to him. He tries to act like he doesn't even know what Keel is, but seeing the look on his face, they realize that Suo's suspicions were right. After he leaves, Neri asks Sakura what they will do to help him, but Sakura mentions that he didn't say anything, so there must be a reason why he isn't talking about it. Neri thinks they should still help him, because he's their friend, but Sakura doesn't say anything, and decides to leave as well. We see Anzai talking to a girl, who thinks they should ask Furin for help, but he mentions that their job is to protect the town, so he can't involve them in his personal business. She wants to help him anyway, but he notes that it's too dangerous, and he tells her he'll take care of everything. After he leaves, she starts crying, but Sakura arrives there, and asks her to tell him what they were talking about. She mentions that she and Anzai have been friends since they were kids, and they used to play in the park, where another boy named Nagato became their friend. After they grew up, they went to separate high schools, but they still thought they would continue to be friends. She saw Anzai beaten up by someone, so he told her that he tried to stop a member of Keel from stealing a purse, but he was shocked to see that it was Nagato. She tells Sakura that Nagato isn't that kind of person, so Anzai went to get him back, but he returned alone and was beaten up. Sakura is surprised to see her crying, and she mentions that she's frustrated, because even though her childhood friend is in trouble, she can't do anything. Sakura decides to help her, and she mentions that Anzai told her he can't get Furin involved, because they're busy protecting the town, but he tells her he'll work something out. She thanks him for his help, but he notes that he didn't have a choice since she was crying. The next day, as Sakura goes to class, he thinks about how he said he'll take care of everything, but he has no idea what to do. A student gives Anzai an envelope, saying someone in a hood told him to deliver it to him, and after he opens it, he runs out of class. Sakura runs after him, and he manages to catch up to him, but he tells Sakura he has nothing to do with it, so he reveals that he talked to his friend yesterday. He takes the envelope from Anzai, and as he opens it up, he sees a picture of Nagato after getting beaten up by Keel. He asks Anzai to tell him everything, so he reveals that 2 days ago, he saw a person stealing a purse, and when he tried to stop him, he couldn't believe it was Nagato. The next day, he went back to find out what's going on, and he was shocked to see Nagato getting bullied by other Keel members. So he tried to save him, but Nagato told him to mind his own business. Sakura doesn't understand why he's with Keel, even though they treat him badly, but Anzai mentions that Nagato was crying, so he wants to help him. Sakura decides to go with him, and Anzai mentions that he doesn't want to involve Furin in his personal problems, so Sakura notes that he isn't going as a member of Furin. But the class overhears their conversation, and they all decide to go, saying they're just helping out their friend. Sakura and his classmates look for Keel's hideout, and he notes that he has no idea what their goal is, but he heard rumors that they're committing crimes. He thinks they're evil because of what they did to Nagato, and he's determined to save him, saying he'll defeat anyone who gets in his way. Anzai knows that they like to fight together, and he mentions that they always have weapons, so he tells everyone to be careful. Sakura's group reaches Keel's hideout, but they realize the door is locked, so they wonder how they can get in. Kotaro tries to open it, but it won't budge, so he kicks it open, and everyone's impressed by his strength. The leader of Keel sees them, and he tells them they aren't welcome there, telling Nagato his friends have arrived. The leader grabs onto him, so Anzai becomes angry, and he's about to charge in, but Sakura stops him. He tells the leader to give Nagato to them, but he refuses, telling them Nagato still hasn't reached his quota. So Sakura realizes they have no choice but to fight, and the leader mocks him, telling him he isn't heroic because he brought his classmates with him, and they're suddenly surrounded. They realize they're outnumbered, so Anzai apologizes for getting them into trouble, but they prepare to fight anyway, thinking they can come out on top. Sakura tells them to sit back, because he doesn't need their help, but they decide to fight by his side. The leader orders his men to attack, and they clash with Sakura's group. Everyone starts fighting, and Sakura's friends are impressed, because the Keel members are no match for him. The leader watches the fight, and he observes the best fighters in Sakura's group. Anzai and Sakura rush in, and their friends clear a path for them as the leader realizes that they're coming for him. Nagato sees Anzai approaching, and he charges at the leader, but he blocks his attack and tells him he's too aggressive. The leader kicks him away, and Sakura sees him as he falls down the stairs. But a boy suddenly attacks Sakura, telling him Keel's best fighters are about to join the battle. 4 of their elite members appear before Sakura's friends, and they show their faces, as the leader notes that it's time for round 2. Sakura wonders why they're all smiling, but one of them, named Kondo, attacks him with a metal pipe, telling him he can't win if he just keeps dodging. A boy named Kirishima pushes Taiga back, but Taiga tells him villains always lose in the end. Another one of the elite fighters named Mogami attacks Kotaro with his weapon, but he manages to defend himself, so Mogami realizes he's a worthy opponent. Another boy named Kaga struggles to hit Kiryu, telling him he moves like a girl. He tells Kaga to stop being rude, but he calls Kiryu a princess. Suo is being attacked by a boy named Tone, who thinks it will be easy to defeat him because he's protecting Miri. He explains that he's stronger when he's fighting to protect someone, but Tone thinks he's just trying to act tough. Sakura realizes that his classmates are losing, so he rushes to help them, but Kondo stops him, telling him to focus on their fight. Sakura tells him to get out of the way, but he suddenly gets hit from behind, and his head starts bleeding. The leader notes that he now has the advantage, because his elite members have suppressed the best fighters in Sakura's group. He thinks Anzai is an idiot for attacking him alone, and he realizes that Sakura's classmates are just first-year students, so he thinks they're no match for his men. Niri freaks out as he realizes that they're losing the fight, and he thinks Suo is struggling because he can't move freely. He thinks he's lame because he isn't a capable fighter, but he thinks he needs to do something. So he runs off and tackles one of the Keel members, but he gets beaten up, and a boy is about to finish him off. But he suddenly gets blown away as Ren appears with his vice reps. Takeshi is glad they made it in time, and the Keel members recognize Ren because he's notorious for being extremely violent. The leader wonders what he's doing there, telling him they aren't a threat to the town, and he explains that they just have a beef with Anzai. But Ren explains that Furin protects everyone in the town, including everyone important to them. He calls the leader an idiot because he attacked the members of Furin, telling him he knows what will happen next. The Keel members are afraid of Ren, and the leader tells them to beat him up, but they don't follow his orders. So he asks them if they want to end up like Nagato, and they attack Ren, but his vice reps protect him. He tells them he'll deal with the leader, and his vice rep Yudo takes Neri to safety, telling him to stay there until the fight is over. Takeshi tells Sakura's group to fight on, and the Keel members try to stop Ren, but he easily knocks them out. He sees Anzai lying on the ground, so he helps him sit down, and the leader is surprised by Ren's kindness. Sakura tells him not to touch the leader, because he wants to be the one to beat him, but Kongo reminds Sakura that their fight isn't over yet. They charge at each other, but they stop as Ren approaches them, and he asks Sakura if he knows what's going on. Kongo tells Ren not to interrupt their fight, but he freaks out as Ren prepares to kick him, so he backs away, wondering if Ren is even human. He knows that Sakura is only thinking about defeating the leader, so he hits him, telling him his classmates are getting beaten up, and Ren explains that his priority as grade rep is to look after his class, so he realizes he screwed up, but he notes that he can't forgive the leader, so Ren promises to give him a good beating. He leaves to deal with the leader, and Kongo thinks he's lucky because he isn't strong enough to defeat Ren. But Sakura suddenly hits himself because he thinks he's lame, and he tells Kongo he doesn't have time to play with him. Ren approaches the leader Notori, who thinks they're the same because he saw how Ren hit Sakura. He thinks Ren uses fear to lead everyone, telling him he also uses it to get his men in line. But he wonders why Ren likes to pretend he's a good guy, and tells him he should leave Furin because protecting people doesn't suit him. Notori invites him to join Keel, but he refuses, telling him he doesn't enjoy beating people up. Kongo gets pushed back and realizes that Sakura is in the zone, so he orders his men to gang up on him, but he easily defeats them all. Kongo can't believe it, and Sakura punches him away, telling everyone he doesn't have time for them. Kirishima hits Taiga, but he refuses to go down, and he mentions that saving his friends is his aesthetic. But their seniors arrive to save them, and Kirishima tells him it's because he's weak, but he wonders why Taiga is smiling, and he prepares to put him down, but Taiga stops the attack, and explains that smiling is also his aesthetic, because he's an entertainer. He lands a devastating blow, which knocks Kirishima down, and he tells him to get back up, because it's time for the final round. Kirishima grabs onto a stick and takes a swing, but Taiga blocks the attack, and he finishes him off. Meanwhile, Kotaro struggles to hit Mogami, who dodges his attacks and kicks him away. But Kotaro suddenly grabs onto him and slams him to the ground. He notes that he hates fighters who rely on their speed, and Mogami tries to get back up, but he realizes his leg is broken, and Kotaro knocks him out cold. Kaga attacks Kiryu, and he mocks him for being a femboy, but Kiryu notes that he sees nothing wrong with that. Kaga tells him the weak must obey the strong, and he steps on his foot, before punching him away. Kaga thinks he broke his wrist, but Kiryu thinks he isn't popular with the girls, because he has a terrible personality. Kiryu mentions that he'll never date him if he were a girl, and he notes that Kaga must be weak, because he takes orders from Notori. But he explains that he's only lending his strength, because he's one of the strongest fighters in the group. But Kiryu tells him he's like a frog in a well, because everyone in his group is weak, telling him he must live in a small world. Kaga becomes upset hearing this, and he continues to attack, but Kiryu hits his shoulder, and he suddenly collapses. Kiryu tells him he'll be more popular if he isn't so arrogant, and he notes that he doesn't usually hit people who can't move, but he thinks Kaga will be a problem if he gets back up. Takeshi and Yudo continue to fight, and their juniors think they're amazing, because there are only 2 of them, but they were able to turn the tide of the battle. Sakura takes out one of the Keel members, and his friends join him, telling him they have already defeated their opponents. But he tells them to take out the rest, and he promises to be there for them next time. He takes out another opponent, but he sees Tone getting beaten up, and Suo approaches him, as Tone wonders why he's giving him a cold stare. Suo knocks him out, and prepares to hit him again, but Sakura stops him, telling him their fight is over, but he asks Sakura if getting beaten up didn't get in his head. So he explains that it did, but he notes that he just blames himself for being reckless. He thinks losing his temper won't fix anything, and Suo suddenly regains his composure, telling Sakura he'll deal with the other Keel members. We return to Ren, as he dodges Notori's attacks, and he manages to land a hit, but Notori catches him and throws him away. Notori notes that his face looks scary, and he invites Ren to join Keel once again, because he isn't fit to be a hero, telling him he's like an animal. He tells Notori he's right, and he recalls the moment he was attacked by a group of men. One of them hit him, and he absolutely lost it, so he beat them up, and when he finally regained his composure, he realized he was surrounded by bodies. Notori thinks it was an awesome experience, but Ren notes that his wild side makes him feel sick, and he mentions that he learned to control it after he joined Furin. He tells Notori he's nothing like his superiors, telling him he isn't fit to be a leader. But he thinks Ren was tamed by Furin, so he calls him a pet, and he wants to remind him what it's like to unleash the beast, so he attacks him with everything he's got. Ren jumps away, and he grabs onto a chain, which he uses to swing back and attack Notori. But he immediately recovers, and kicks Ren away. He continues to attack, as he notes that Ren has gotten weaker, because Furin took away his fangs. But he suddenly gets back up, and delivers a devastating kick, which breaks Notori's bat. He starts laughing, because he likes the look on Ren's face, and they trade blows, but Ren manages to overpower him. He notes that Ren's expression makes him feel alive, but Ren knocks him out, and he's about to hit him again. But he realizes that Notori is already out cold. His vice reps approach him, and they realize that the fight is over. Takeshi tells him everyone's waiting for him, and his vice reps raise his hands, so everyone realizes they won the battle. Anzai wakes up, and he wonders what happened, so everyone tells him the fight is over. Nagato asks him why he went so far, because he knows he fought Keel for him. But Sakura tells him Furin didn't fight for him, and he notes that Notori made him upset, so he wanted to beat him up. He tells Nagato that Anzai got beaten up trying to save him, but he can't even look him in the eye, asking him if he didn't want to be saved. So he explains that he was a bad friend to Anzai, and he can't take back everything he did, so he thinks he doesn't deserve to be saved. But Ren tells him his opinion doesn't matter, because Anzai still decided to save him after everything that happened. In a flashback, we see Nagato walking around the street when he sees a group of students bullying a boy, and they take his wallet. He thinks about ignoring them, but he recalls how Anzai saved him when he was bullied in the past. So he calls out to the bullies and tells them to return the boy's wallet, but they beat him up and tell him to know his place. But a Keel member suddenly arrives to save them, and we see that it's Notori. The boy thanks Nagato for saving him, but he thinks he's lame because he wasn't strong enough to defeat the bullies. But Notori tells him he's cool because he had the guts to fight the bullies alone. Notori tells him he's been looking for someone like him and invites him to join his team. Nagato heads to Keel's hideout, and Notori introduces himself as their boss, but two of his men suddenly start fighting. One of them is upset because the other wants to leave the group, so he knocks him down. Nagato wonders if Notori will stop them, but he suddenly hits Nagato, telling him he's a perfect addition to his team because he's a weakling with a strong moral compass. So he thinks it will be easy to control him, telling him he can't leave the team. They order him to raise money for them, and he empties his bank account to meet his quota, but they still tell him he isn't doing enough. His superior starts punching him, telling him he'll get hit every time he doesn't meet his quota. So he becomes desperate for money and starts stealing from other people to save his own skin. We return to the present as Nagato finishes telling everyone his story, and Anzai thinks he has failed him because he wasn't strong enough to save him from Keel when he first met them. But Nagato tells him not to blame himself and reveals that he always wanted to be like him. He thought joining Keel would make him cool and strong like Anzai, but he thinks he'll never be as good as him. Anzai hugs him and tells him he has always been amazing because he never stopped thinking about the safety of his friends. Neri wakes up and he asks everyone where he is, so Kiria tells him they're on their way home. He realizes that they were able to win the fight and he's glad everyone's okay, but Suo flicks his head, telling him not to rush out while he's protecting him. But Taiga knows that Neri saved them because he sent a message to their seniors before they enter the hideout. They see Sakura behind them, and Neri is glad he made it, but Sakura tells him to worry about himself because he almost died. He tells Sakura he's brilliant because he just became the grade rep, but he already got everyone together. But he thinks he failed his classmates because his recklessness put them in danger, telling them they would have lost if their seniors hadn't arrived. He blames himself for the disaster, but Anzai tells him to stop talking nonsense and thanks him for helping him save Nagato. His classmates note that they got knocked around because they were weak, so they don't blame him for what happened. Neri tells him not to shoulder everything alone because his friends are there for him, and Suo tells him they should make a fresh start together. Sakura notes that he had a strange feeling when he saw his friends getting beaten up, and he wonders why he struggled against a weakling like Kongo, thinking his time with Furin has changed him. Takeshi mentions that the same thing happened to Ren when he first became grade rep, but he tells Takeshi to forget about it, asking him what he thought about Keel. So he notes that they have a ridiculous number of members for a new team, and Ren thinks Notori couldn't have recruited all of them. Everyone heads to a restaurant, where they report the incident to Yumiya, and Anzai apologizes for causing trouble for Furin. But Yumiya tells them they did a great job, and the owner of the restaurant gives them free food, so they start eating together. Anzai can't believe Yumiya isn't upset, because everyone got involved with his problem. But Yumiya reminds him that Nagato is his friend, so it was Furin's duty to save him. He also apologizes for the incident, but Yumiya tells him to eat, and he starts crying, because it's been a long time since he had a good meal. Yumiya tells him to remember the taste of the food, because they can't enjoy their meals when things get rough, but it tastes even better when they eat it with someone who puts their mind at ease. He tells Nagato he can't change the past, so he needs to learn to live with it, and Yumiya knows that he'll face challenges in the future. But he tells him to remember the taste of the food when that time comes, telling Nagato it's proof that he's never alone. Everyone continues to enjoy the food, but Yumiya realizes that Sakura is sad, so Neri notes that he blames himself for what happened. He mentions that he hates himself, because he talked big, but he couldn't move like he usually does during the fight. Yumiya knows that he felt it after he saw his friends losing, and tells him his movements were affected because he likes them. Sakura becomes embarrassed hearing this, but he hits his leg, and Yumiya laughs at him. After that, Yumiya asks Hiragi what he thinks about Sakura, and he notes that Sakura is just like Yumiya, who thinks he has incredible potential. Nagato and Anzai meet the girl, who realizes they're in terrible condition, so she starts crying, but she welcomes Nagato back. The girl thanks Sakura for saving him, but he tells her not to mention it, because he was just keeping his promise. Meanwhile at Keel's hideout, one of them stands up, and reveals that he went there to watch the fight with Furin, but he's disappointed because Keel was no match for them. He thinks the group is done for, since Notori failed as their leader, but he notes that it doesn't matter, because he gained something from the battle. He thinks about his next move, and removes his jacket, revealing a strange tattoo on his back. We see Anzai talking to his classmates, and Neri is glad he feels better now. Anzai asks him if he has news about Sakura, but Neri explains that he hasn't been reading his messages, and they realize he's absent, so they wonder what happened to him. Anzai is worried, because he was sad after the fight, so Neri decides to call him. Everyone's happy he picked up, but he suddenly hangs up, so Anzai wonders if he's okay. Neri mentions that he isn't sure, but he believes Sakura is sick. Neri and Suo decide to visit him, and they start looking for his house. But when they arrive at his address, they see a poorly maintained building, and Suo notes that it looks like a haunted house. They head to his unit, but realize the doorbell isn't ringing, and Suo notes that the door isn't locked. He sees Sakura's shoes inside, and calls out for him, but they don't see anyone in the room, so Suo decides to go in. Neri tells him they can't just barge in, but Suo reminds him that Sakura lives alone, and he probably can't move because he's sick. So Suo thinks something bad might happen to him, and Neri imagines him dying alone, so he starts screaming. Sakura hears him and tells him to keep quiet, but he's surprised to see his friends, so he asks them what they're doing there. Neri explains that they're there to visit him, and Suo realizes he isn't feeling well, so he tells him to return to bed. They see his room, and realize that he really lives alone, so they offer to help him out, asking him if he wants to eat the food they brought for him. They show him the gifts from their classmates, and Neri notes that they can help him recover, but he tells them not to worry about him, because he just needs to rest. Suo tells Neri they shouldn't bother him, and they decide to leave, telling him to contact them if he needs anything. But Neri asks Suo why they're leaving, so he explains that it's better to leave Sakura alone, because he isn't used to having friends at his house. Suo thinks they should give him space, so that he won't tire himself out, telling Neri they should visit him again if he doesn't come to school tomorrow. Neri notes that he wants Sakura to know he can count on his friends, because he promised to help him reach the top. But Sakura has been carving his path alone, so Neri wants to be there for him when he's in trouble, and there's someone who interrupts them. Sakura sees his classmates' gifts, and he realizes they all care for him. He recalls that he has always been alone, and thinks about what Yumiya told him, thinking he can't freeze up just because he likes his classmates. He wonders what's wrong with him, and he freaks out as he hears someone approaching, but he realizes it's just Koto. She gives him food, and tells him to eat as much as he can, so he digs in, and she's glad he still has an appetite. She notes that she bumped into Neri and Suo, and tells him Neri was panicking, but he doesn't seem to care. So she hits him, telling him everyone's worried about him. She knows that he got into another fight, and thinks it's the reason why he got a fever, but he tells her it isn't the case. She wonders if he's stressed because he realized he likes his classmates, so he gets embarrassed, asking her who told her what happened, so she reveals that it was Yumiya. He thinks they aren't the reason why he froze up, but she tells him he can't change what happened, and suggests he rely on them the next time it happens. But he wants to do everything himself, so she takes his food, asking him if he can prepare it himself. She knows it's easy to make, but he doesn't have a stove or a pot, and she explains that he can rest at the moment, because his friends gave him supplies. She notes that people can only do so much with their time, so Sakura should learn to rely on others, but she knows it's scary to do it at first. The next day, we see that Sakura has already recovered, and he visits Ren, telling him he wants to talk to him about the last fight. But they realize that Ren's classmates are watching them, and they start teasing him for looking after his junior, so he tells his vice reps to stop them while he talks to Sakura. Sakura notes that he needs to learn how to rely on others, so he asks Ren how he can let his vice reps do everything for him. He buys a coffee and gives it to Sakura, but he has no idea why Ren just did that. He suddenly takes Sakura to the roof, telling him it's best to talk somewhere high and spacious, and he reveals that he relies on others because he knows he can't do everything alone. Sakura explains that he can't do that since he doesn't want to admit that he isn't strong enough to do everything by himself. Rin takes the coffee he gave Sakura and changes the label to green tea, but he explains that it's still coffee, telling him he can't change its contents even if he changes the label. Sakura isn't sure what he means, so he explains that it's just like Sakura because he's trying to pretend that he can handle everything, but he knows he can't do it. Rin knows that he's afraid of being rejected by others, and he thinks about how nobody liked him in the past. He believes his classmates accepted him because they know he's a capable fighter, but he thinks they'll leave him if he starts leaning on them. But Rin tells him everyone already knows how he feels because he snapped out after the fight. Rin mentions that a woman is said to appear on the roof at night, but when the students checked it out the next day, they realized that it was just a plastic bag wrapped around a shovel. So Sakura notes that there's nothing to be afraid of, and Ren mentions that he's just like the students in the story, because he's scared of being rejected for nothing. Ren reminds him that he snapped out in front of his friends, but they still accepted him for who he is, telling him they won't reject him even if he starts relying on them. Ren tells Sakura to believe in his friends, but Yumiya suddenly interrupts them, telling Ren his advice is brilliant. So he freaks out, and Yumiya tells him he sounds like Hiragi, so he punches Yumiya and runs away. He notes that Ren has grown, and tells Sakura not to be afraid, because everyone in Furin will forgive him even if he messes up, so everything will be okay if he just believes in his friends. After that, Yumiya notes that he never expected Ren to look after his junior, and we learn that Hiragi taught him this same lesson when he was just starting out. Sakura thinks about how he's been walking a tightrope all his life, because he thinks that's the only way people will accept him for who he is. He believes he can only rely on himself, and notes that his life isn't easy, because everyone shunned him in the past. But he thinks he doesn't need to stay on the tightrope all his life, thinking he can grow if he can find a place where he belongs. We see Sakura's classmates talking about him, wondering if he'll return to school, and he suddenly joins them in the room. Everyone's glad that he's back, but Neri realizes he isn't acting like his usual self, so he asks him if he's still sick. We learn that he's hesitating, because he isn't sure if he should open up to everyone, but he recalls how Yumiya told him not to be afraid. So he tells everyone how he always thought he could do everything alone, and he apologizes for snapping out in front of them. He mentions that he's lame, and thinks they're all disappointed in him as their class rep, telling them he'll probably cause more problems for them in the future. Everyone falls silent, but Kotaro suddenly kicks him, so Sakura asks him what's wrong with him. Kotaro tells him he was blocking the way, and everyone beats him up, telling him to stop talking nonsense, and Anzai notes that he shouldn't tell everyone he's lame, because they've already accepted him for who he is. Anzai explains that he doesn't need to apologize, telling him they're trying to repay him, because they know he's willing to do anything for them. He realizes that they like him for who he is, so he finally feels like he has found a place where he belongs. Suo knows that he's struggling to take it all in, because he's always been alone, so he tells him to take his time. But Anzai mentions that Sakura doesn't understand them, so they should eat together after school. He knows that they just want free food, and his classmates start making demands, so Anzai tells him to decide what they should eat as their grade rep. Suo asks him what he wants to eat, and he mentions that he wants a rice omelette, so everyone decides to go to Koto's cafe. Suo is glad that Sakura is starting to feel better, but he realizes that Neri isn't acting like his usual self. So he asks him what's wrong, and Neri explains that he just spaced out. Everyone heads to Koto's cafe, and we see that she's upset because she can't serve all of them, reminding them that her place isn't a restaurant. But they beg her to make rice omelette for them, so she realizes she doesn't have a choice. Sakura apologizes for what happened yesterday, telling her he'll give back her bowl next time, but she realizes he's acting strange. Everyone enjoys the food, and a boy named Takanashi notes that since Sakura confessed how lame he is, they should all say something bad about themselves. They tell him to kick it off, so he reveals that he hates bugs, telling them he gets weak whenever he sees them. Taiga is up next, and he tells everyone he's afraid of ghosts. So he always keeps the lights on when he's in the bathroom, and never closes his eyes when he takes a shower. He notes that his muscles are no match for ghosts, asking Sakura if he's also afraid of them. Suo explains that everyone has a weakness, and Kiryu asks him what he's afraid of, so he reveals that he's scared of manju. Sakura asks him if he's referring to the food called manju, but he reveals that he lied, because he couldn't think of anything. But Neri knows that he hates the food called natto, since he gathered information about him. So everyone decides to look for natto, and he tries to stop them, but they all gang up on him. Sakura smiles, but they stare at him, so he asks them what's wrong. Everyone laughs at him, because they know his smile isn't cheap, and Koto is glad they're all having a good time. Yumiya watches them from outside, and he thinks about joining them, but Hiragi stops him, telling him not to interrupt them. Sakura sees Yumiya as he leaves, but he sees a girl following him, so he wonders who she is. After that, we see everyone on the rooftop, and Sakura wonders why Yumiya gathered them all. Hiragi reveals that Yumiya's policy is to have a gathering every once in a while, so that he can talk to them, but Hiragi adds that he also does it to show people his plants, because he's happy when people appreciate how much they've grown. Sakura meets the girl he saw at the cafe, but he realizes she's taller than him, and when he hears her voice, he realizes that she's actually a guy. So he freaks out, and Neri tells him to stop being rude, because he's talking to one of Furin's 4 kings. He introduces himself as Tasuku, and Neri wonders if he knows about Sakura, so he reveals that he heard about him, because his moves make him stand out. He reveals that he also likes his appearance, and hopes Sakura can get used to the way he dresses up. But he notes that he sees nothing wrong with it, and Tasuku is happy hearing this, telling Sakura he's a good boy. But he realizes that he hugged him too tightly, so he lets him go, and introduces him to his vice reps. He reveals that they're brothers, and the older one's name is Seiryu, while the younger one is Yuryu. They stare at Sakura, and Seiryu comments on his appearance, but Tasuka hits him and tells them to stop staring. Yumiya invites everyone to taste the soup he made, and Tasuka tells him it's perfect, telling him he could open a restaurant. Tasuka notes that he's falling in love with him, and Sakura becomes flustered hearing this, so everyone wonders what's wrong with him. Suo explains that Sakura is just responding to the vibes between them, and notes that he's sensitive to moods and gestures, so even the slightest things make him blush. Tasuka thinks Sakura is an innocent boy, and he blushes even more, so they realize that he really is sensitive. He apologizes for getting flustered, and Tasuka tells him it's okay, but his vice reps tell him they need to go, so he bids everyone farewell. But he suddenly stares at Sakura, and invites him to go on a date with him. We see Sakura and his friends with Tasuku, who reveals that they will visit the home of an old man named Ito, telling them he visits because he worries about him. He reveals that Ito lost his wife a year ago, so he now lives alone, and Tasuku notes that they just need to spend time with him, because he seems to be depressed. But he cheerfully greets them as they visit him, and they note that the garden has been trimmed, so they think he isn't depressed at all. Tasuku introduces him to the others, and he notes that Sakura's eyes are beautiful, saying they remind him of the time he went to the beach with his wife Yui. He recalls that they watched the sunset together, and it was so beautiful that they couldn't move properly that night. But he apologizes for reminiscing about his past, telling them to come in, and they realize that his house is a mess. Tasuku mentions that he needs to replace his light bulb, so Niri volunteers to do it for him, and they start cleaning his house. He tells Sakura to take a box to the back room, but he sees that it's filled with dusty clothes, realizing Ito hasn't worn them for a long time. After that, Tasuku invites Ito to go on a date with him, telling him to dress up when they go outside, and he reminds Ito about the time he saw the cherry blossoms with his wife. Niri and Suo realize they were fashionable as a couple, and Ito reveals that Yui was always stylish, so he tried to match her fashion sense. He notes that he once gave her a dress, and he thinks it wasn't very stylish, but she matched it with accessories and shoes to make it look better. Tasuku thinks she wore it for a long time, but Ito tells him it isn't the case, revealing that she didn't talk much, but he enjoyed every moment he spent with her. Tasuku and the others are about to leave, and Ito thanks Sakura for reminding him about his wife, but he explains that he didn't do anything. Tasuku notes that Ito has become lively, but he still appears to be in pain, so Tasuku thinks something's bothering him, and he wants to lift his spirit. Suo wonders why he's willing to go so far for Ito, so he explains that he owes him and his wife, because they loved him for who he is. In a flashback, we see Tasuku watching the girls play, and his friends know that he finds their toys cute, but they give him a flyer about cars, so he pretends to like them. But when he turns it around, he sees an ad about accessories, and he thinks about adding them to his collection, because he finds them amazing. He sees an earring on the floor, and thinks it looks pretty, but Ito suddenly appears, telling him his wife lost it, so Tasuku gives it to him. Ito invites him to his house, where he meets Yui, who thanks him for finding her earring. He thinks her dress is beautiful, and Ito becomes happy hearing this, telling him he asked her to wear it this season. He tells Tasuku to visit them again, so that he can appreciate Yui's clothes, and ever since then, he went to their house every day, so that he could see their clothes. But one day, he sees Yui wearing her lipstick, and she asks him what he thinks about it, but he explains that he doesn't know since he's a boy. Ito calls her, and as she leaves the room, Tasuku thinks about trying on her lipstick, but he hesitates since he isn't a girl. She tells him to go ahead, and helps him put it on, while Ito joins them, telling him it looks good on him. But he suddenly starts crying, wondering why he's so happy, because normal boys shouldn't be using lipstick. He mentions that he wants to be like everyone else, but Yui notes that men used to wear high heels because they were made to stabilize the body while drawing a bow on a horse. She adds that makeup once served as a charm to protect the body, so men also used it in the past, and she tells him to just be himself. Ito explains that he should stop thinking about what other people think, because normal is an ambiguous concept, and it keeps changing with the times. They tell him they love him for who he is, telling him the lipstick suits him well, and he cries because they accept him even though he's different. We return to the present, as Tasuku reveals that he was afraid he would be alone, because he's nothing like the others, but Ito and Yui accepted him for who he is. Niri cries hearing his story, and he wants to help him find out what's bothering Ito, so that he can be happy again. Everyone decides to help Tasuku, so he tells them they're amazing, and notes that they'll return to Ito's house tomorrow. The next day, they visit Ito again, and he opens his photo album, telling them about the clothes Yui used to wear. Tasuku notices that she never looks at the camera, so Ito reveals that she always looked away when he took pictures of her, but he thinks it makes the photos look candid. Tasuku wonders if they have pictures together, so Ito shows him their photo, which was taken in their garden, and Sakura becomes flustered seeing it. Tasuku wonders if it triggered his romance sensor, and he explains that it isn't the case, but Tasuku tells Ito that he blushes whenever he senses anything romantic. He asks Sakura what he thinks about the photo, so he mentions that he feels happiness, thinking Tasuku looks like Yui when he's with Yumiya. He becomes embarrassed hearing this, revealing that he loves Yumiya, but Ito suddenly starts crying, because he wasn't sure if Yui truly loved him. He reveals that they had an arranged marriage, and she never spoke about her feelings, so he wasn't sure if she was happy to be with him. He notes that it made him feel uneasy after he lost her, but Suo asks him about the dogwood tree in the photo because it's the only tree that blooms in the garden. Ito reveals that gardening is his hobby, but Yui planted the tree and insisted on taking a picture together in the garden. Suo wonders if anything happened between them after she planted the tree, so Ito reveals that he saw Yui stitching a flower onto her hat and told her he liked it when she's absorbed in her fashion, so he wanted to be fashionable enough to get her attention. He notes that he felt embarrassed afterwards, and she never said anything to him, thinking she planted the tree on a whim. But Suo reveals that the meanings behind a dogwood tree are eternity and flourishing romance, and he thinks that she planted it to show him that she was interested in him. Everyone's convinced that she loved him, and Sakura notes that she appears to be happy in the picture. So Ito realizes that she always had feelings for him, thinking she's amazing because he never noticed it all this time. We see Sakura with his friends, and Neri is excited to try the shop Tasuku recommended to them, but Sakura wonders if he got beaten up because he has bandages on his face. But he explains that he just tripped and tells Sakura they need to hurry. They follow the map, but they reach the red light district, where they get invited into shops by cute girls. Neri freaks out, and he suggests heading back because students like them shouldn't be there, reminding Sakura that they aren't in Furin territory. But a woman suddenly appears, and she crashes into Sakura, so she apologizes for hurting him and tries to help him up. But they see that her dress is ripped, and she realizes that her necklace is gone, so she starts to panic. A group of men suddenly surround them, and their leader reveals that they've been hired to capture her, asking her if the boys are her friends. But Sakura interrupts him, telling the leader it doesn't matter, but he threatens to beat them if they don't hand her over. The girl decides to surrender, but Suo stops her, and Sakura prepares to fight, so the leader orders his men to attack. Sakura tells Suo to protect the girl, but Neri volunteers to do it, telling Suo to help Sakura fight. He thinks it's a bad idea, but Suo thinks they should trust him, and he recalls that Ren told him to believe in his friends, so he tells Neri to stay with the girl. The men charge in, so Sakura and Suo start taking them down, but one of them gets past and goes for Neri. Sakura becomes worried, but Neri keeps his eyes focused and ducks at the last second, causing the man to fall. In a flashback to a few days earlier, we see Neri walking with Suo, who asks him why he appears to be down, so he explains that he feels useless. He notes that he wants to be helpful to Sakura, but he isn't strong enough to do anything, so he begs Suo to teach him how to fight. He agrees to teach Neri how to protect himself, but tells him to stock up on band-aids since he's going to get hurt. They begin their training, and Suo notes that Neri should learn to defeat his opponent while protecting himself, so he wonders if he's about to learn an awesome technique. But Suo tells him he'll become a roly-poly, and he becomes confused, so Suo tells him to try punching him. Neri rushes forward, but Suo suddenly disappears, causing him to fall over, telling him to duck at the perfect moment to defeat his opponent. He's about to hit the ground, but Suo saves him, and he thinks he can master the technique since it's basic. But Suo suddenly prepares to hit him, and he panics, so Suo tells him not to close his eyes during a fight. We return to the present, as Neri's opponent hits the ground, but another man prepares to kick him, and he panics. So Suo saves him, and knocks the man down, reminding Neri that he should never close his eyes, but he compliments him for pulling off the move he taught him. Sakura is impressed, and he copies the move to defeat his opponents, as their leader realizes that his men have been wiped out. Sakura starts beating him up, but he misses, and the leader realizes he's wide open, so he tries to counter, but Sakura suddenly knocks him out. The girl can't believe Sakura's group defeated everyone, and Suo tells Neri he did a good job, but he thinks his execution was lame, but Sakura tells him that he looked cool. Neri asks the girl why the men were chasing her, but Sakura sees someone approaching, so he pushes Neri away and blocks the attack. He realizes that the man is stronger than the ones they took down, while the girl tries to stop him, but he refuses to listen to her. He asks them if they were hunting her down, and realizes she got hurt, so he becomes angry, but she suddenly slaps him, telling him to listen to her. She explains the situation to him, so he immediately apologizes for his actions. He admits that he always springs into action without thinking, but Suo tells him it's okay, and Neri asks them who they are. So the man introduces himself as Kanji, and also tells them about Shizuka, who sings at a bar, mentioning that she's like an angel when she's on stage, and she's flattered hearing this. Neri notes that they seem to get along, but Suo sees Sakura's reaction, so he thinks they're more than just friends. Kanji asks him why he's blushing, but he suddenly pulls him and Shizuka to safety, as he sees an enemy behind them. But a man named Miyoshi suddenly comes to their rescue, and his gang joins him, as he scolds Kanji for being reckless, telling him his feelings for Shizuka are always getting in the way. Neri panics as he sees them, but she tells him it's okay, because they're all her allies. They think Kanji defeated the group of men, but he explains that he didn't, and notes that Sakura's group took them down. Miyoshi apologizes for the trouble their chairman caused, so they realize that Kanji is their leader, and he reveals that their group is the Roppo Akiza. Neri is surprised hearing this, because he recognizes them as a super brawler team, which clashed with Furin in the past. Kanji hears him, so he realizes they're from Furin, and Neri thinks he's screwed up, but Kanji doesn't care, and he tells Sakura he likes him, because he jumped to save them from the surprise attack. Shizuka asks Neri if he knows Tasuku, so he reveals that they went there to meet him, and she mentions that Tasuku also works at her bar. So Sakura and his friends decide to go there, and they see Tasuku dancing in front of everyone. They all enjoy his performance, thinking he's amazing, but Sakura doesn't seem to be impressed. Tasuku buys food for them, telling them it's his way of thanking them for helping Ito, who seems like a different person now, because he's been dressing up and going out more often. Tasuku notes that he plans to enjoy his life before he joins Yui, and he thanks everyone for helping Ito cheer up, while Suo mentions that he enjoyed talking to him. Tasuku orders a fruit platter for them, but he realizes that his vice reps are behind him, and they thank him for the free food. He can't believe how much they've eaten, and he realizes he needs to pay for them, so he cancels his order, telling them to be more modest. Neri notes that his performance was amazing, telling him he's extremely talented, so he's flattered, but Neri starts asking him questions about his dance. So he explains he got hooked after he saw videos of it online, and he wanted to perform on stage. But he couldn't find a place to dance near Furin, so he begged the manager of the bar to let him perform there. Kanji joins them, and he reveals that he was there when it happened, but Tasuku asks him if he worked with Sakura to stop a drunken brawl. So he reveals that it's true, and he notes that Sakura saved him, but Tasuku tells him to be responsible, because he's the guardian of the street. Sakura and his friends wonder what Tasuku means by guardian, so Kanji explains that fights are common in the street, because it's filled with booze and entertainment. So he worked to maintain order, and gathered like-minded people to form the Roppo Akiza. Sakura and his friends realize they're just like Furin, and Tasuku notes that they're around the same age as them, which surprises everyone. But Kanji explains that they're different from Furin, because they just gathered to deal with troublemakers, while Furin was started by Yumiya, who built everything from scratch. Kanji thinks he's amazing, and Neri is happy that the leader of Roppo Akiza praised Yumiya, but Kanji hopes Furin doesn't run into troubles in the future. Shizuka steps on stage, and Neri is surprised to see her there. She puts up a stunning performance, as everyone realizes that her voice is amazing, and Kanji notes that she became the #1 performer in just 3 months. After her performance, everyone cheers for her, and she approaches Tasuku, who asks her about her hands, but she explains that she just tripped, and Kanji thanks the others for not telling Tasuku about what happened, because he thinks of her as his little sister. So he would get angry if he found out, and Kanji mentions that Tasuku is scary when he loses his temper. But a man suddenly bursts through the door, and he tells Kanji that a gang is causing trouble outside, thinking they're with the group that Sakura defeated. So he decides to deal with it, and Tasuku wants to join him, but Kanji begs him to protect Shizuka, because the gang might enter the bar. Sakura and his friends head outside, and Kanji tells them to stay there, but Sakura reminds him that he was the one who beat up the group, so he needs to take responsibility. Tasuku knows they're hiding something, but he tells them to go ahead, telling Kanji to make sure Sakura and his friends get back safely. They head outside, and Neri notes that they might need help, because he knows that the Roppo Akiza only has a few members. They reach the battlefield, as Kanji tells Neri not to underestimate his men, because they're all excellent fighters. We see the members of Roppo Akiza beating up the gangsters, and a man named Shogo throws one of them away, while the fighter named Ritsu kicks everyone in his path. Kanji arrives with Sakura, but one of the gangsters mentions that they still vastly outnumber them, and he threatens to destroy the street if they don't hand over Shizuka. But Kanji sends him flying, and he charges in alone, taking out everyone in his path. The gangsters gang up on him, but he easily overpowers them, and one of them tries to attack him from behind, but Kanji kicks him away. Sakura is impressed by his skills, and he suddenly joins the fight, telling Kanji he won't let him have all the action. They start fighting together, and Miyoshi is impressed, because Sakura can keep up with Kanji. Suo notes that he's their great rep, and he takes out the gangsters with Miyoshi, who mentions that he likes his style, but he wonders if Neri will be okay. Suo tells him not to worry, because even though Neri can't fight, his desire to get stronger is unmatched. Neri recalls that Suo told him not to fight, because survival is more important than winning, but he admits that he's frustrated since he can't do anything. But Suo assures him he'll become stronger in the future, and he watches everyone fight, thinking Roppo Akiza has the advantage. But the leader of the gangsters named Shuhei arrives with reinforcements. He realizes that the Roppo Akiza took out his men, and he's impressed that they were able to do it, since they don't have that many members. He thinks their suits make them stronger, telling his men to wear suits as well, and they think about stealing from the clothing stores, so Neri realizes they're insane. Kanji asks Shuhei about the group Sakura defeated, so he explains that he isn't connected to them, revealing that his gang was hired to complete the job after they screwed up. He reveals that they're a group from the Sanaba district called Gravel, and Neri freaks out hearing this, because he knows that Sanaba is filled with outlaws. Sakura thinks it's just like Furin in the past, but Neri explains that it's different, because it has a poor economy, so people had to resort to crime just to survive. He notes that Gravel's members don't work or go to school, and they make a living as mercenaries, which explains why they casually talk about stealing clothes. Shuhei reveals that their job is to capture Shizuka, and he notes that the reward increased after the first group failed, so he thinks he can use the money to buy barbecue for everyone. He asks Kanji to hand her over, telling him they didn't go there to fight, so they'll leave as soon as they complete their mission. He adds that Kanji's friends are exhausted, and they still need to deal with his men, thinking they don't stand a chance against his gang. Sakura doesn't think they can win, but Kanji notes that he doesn't care, because Roppo Akiza's goal is to protect everyone in the town. He explains that it doesn't matter if they lose, as long as they keep the people safe, and Sakura realizes he's just like Yumiya, because he also fights for selfless reasons. Shuhei mentions that his gang will look for Shizuka after they make it through, but Kanji tells him they'll never reach her, because she has capable people protecting her. Shuhei realizes that Kanji wants to fight, telling him he'll get Shizuka as a reward after he defeats him, but Kanji gets angry hearing this, and he tells his men to prepare for battle. Tasuka and the twins try to distract Shizuka, but they realize she's worried about Kanji, so they tell her to relax, reminding her that he's a capable fighter. She leaves to go to the bathroom, but Tasuka notes that Kanji and the others were acting sus before they left, so the twins think the fight has something to do with her. Tasuka notes that it's normal for girls to have secrets, but he realizes that she's taking too long, and we see her running outside. We return to Shuhei, as he notes that his men are getting beaten up because Kanji is fighting like a beast. But his friends are already exhausted, and we see one of them hitting a boy, who realizes that he's getting weaker. The gangsters restrain him, and the boy charges in, but Sakura kicks him away. He realizes that Roppo Akiza is losing the fight, so he does his best to help them, but another guy charges at him. Kanji saves him, but Sakura realizes he's gone berserk, and he attacks him as well. But he suddenly calms down, realizing he was about to hit Sakura. He tells him to escape to the bar, because he promised Tasuku to get him back safely, but Sakura refuses to abandon them. Shuhei tells them they're about to lose, so Suo runs away with Sakura, and reminds him that they need to protect Shizuka. But everyone's surprised as she suddenly arrives, and she tells them to stop fighting, while Shuhei looks at the picture of his target, realizing it looks exactly like her. She decides to go with him, because she doesn't want the Roppo Akiza to get wiped out, but Neri tries to stop her, telling her they're fighting to protect her. But she explains that she wants what's best for them, because she appreciates everything they've done for her. In a flashback, we learn that Shizuka came to the town alone, and Kanji looked after her, asking her about her hobbies. So she revealed that she likes to sing, but she thinks she isn't good enough to perform in front of an audience. He asks her to sing anyway, and he's stunned by her performance, telling her he'll help her find a job as a performer. We return to the present, as Shizuka notes that she enjoyed her life in the town, because she's surrounded by wonderful people, and even fell in love for the first time. So she doesn't want the Roppo Akiza to get hurt, telling them to let her go, but Shuhei laughs at her because he knows that she also came from the Sanaba district. He knows that she worked as a cleaner, but a rich pervert wanted to buy her, so she decided to run away. He mentions that everyone got dragged into the mess because of her, and Kanji becomes angry hearing this, telling her not to listen to him. But the gangsters surround him, and Shuhei tells her to come over if she wants to save everyone, so she rushes to get to him, while Sakura tries to stop her. But they're surprised to see the twins, and Tasuku suddenly appears, so she tells him to go away, because she has already made up her mind. But he asks her what she wants to do, and she mentions that she wants to be with everyone, so he tells her to stand back while he takes care of everything. Shuhei explains that she finally woke up from her dream, and it's time for her to stop living a life that isn't fit for her, but Tasuku thinks he's just jealous of her. He notes that people who make fun of things usually aren't happy with themselves, but Shuhei mentions that he doesn't get it, and he orders his men to crush everyone. So they rush forward, and Sakura prepares to join the fight, but Tasuku stops him, and tells Sakura and his friends to look after Shizuka. He explains that he believes in them, because they helped him save Ito, so he wants them to stay by her side, and they promise to keep her safe. He prepares to join the battle, and tells his friends he'll deal with Shuhei, but the gangsters get in his way, so he orders the twins to clear a path for him. They work together to beat up the gangsters, and everyone thinks they're amazing, because their movements are perfectly synchronized. One of the gang members tries to attack Tasuku, but he kicks him away, and challenges Shuhei to fight him. Sakura tells Shizuka to stop blaming herself for the chaos, and notes that everyone's doing their best to fight for her, so he's determined to protect her. But Suo notes that the gangsters can't get past Tasuku and the twins, who are beating up everyone in their path. The twins note that Roppo Akiza was struggling against the gangsters because they were vastly outnumbered, but the gangsters are about to get wiped out. Shuhei orders his men to charge in, but Kanji and his friends instantly take them out, so Shuhei becomes angry and charges in, but his attack is easily blocked. Tasuku invites him to dance with him, telling him to take the lead, and he struggles to hit Tasuku, who dodges his attacks and kicks him away. He can't believe his gang is struggling to complete the mission, thinking it must be because their enemies are well fed, and he decides to fight seriously. He clashes with Tasuku again, and they start exchanging blows, as everyone realizes that they're evenly matched. Shuhei notes that he was expecting to get easy money by completing the job, and Tasuku tells him he won't let him have Shizuka, but Shuhei manages to hit him in the face. He tastes Tasuku's makeup, telling him it's terrible, and he mocks him for wearing it. Shuhei prepares to finish him off, but Tasuku is able to stop him, telling him his makeup makes him stronger because it strengthens his heart by allowing him to become the person he loves. Shuhei thinks he's ridiculous, but Tasuku feels sorry for him, realizing he doesn't know how it feels. Shuhei continues to attack him, but Tasuku sends him flying and tells him to get back up so that he can show him what he's really made of. They continue to exchange blows, and Shuhei manages to land another hit, but Tasuku keeps fighting because he refuses to let Shuhei have Shizuka. Shuhei grabs onto his hair and punches him in the face, but he endures the blow and kicks him down. Shuhei's friends become worried, but he gets back up, and Sakura wonders why they care about him because they didn't react when their other friends got beaten up. In a flashback, we see all the kids in the Sanaba district fighting over food, but Shuhei decides to befriend them by sharing his food with them. He believes that everything will improve in the future, but the population continues to grow, and they don't have enough resources to feed everyone. He eventually realizes that nobody will save them from their extreme poverty, so he decides to take action and suggests forming a team with his friends. They think it's a bad idea because they aren't good at anything, but he mentions that they can use their numbers as a selling point and split the rewards with everyone. He notes that they can succeed together, and they put their plan into action as they start working as mercenaries. They're able to complete tasks for their clients, and their situation improves, so Shuhei thinks he made the right move. We return to the present, as Shuhei notes that they need to take from others to move forward, because miracles don't happen in the real world. He thinks Tasuku will never understand them, because he was born with a decent background, while they had to fight over food just to survive. Shuhei mentions that he never had anything to begin with, so Tasuku's words are just noise to him, and he punches him away. But Tasuku thinks his words reached Shuhei because he appears to be in pain, telling him he wants to get to know him better. Shuhei is angry and charges at Tasuku, as his friends mention that they've never seen him so desperate. He tells Tasuku to stop talking nonsense because he'll never understand what it's like to be born with nothing, but he tells him he knows nothing about him either. He explains that their conditions are different, but he also had a hard time, and he mentions that he won't let Shuhei have Shizuka, so he's determined to take him down. Shuhei rushes forward, but Tasuku kicks him away, so his friends think about helping him. But he tells them to stay back, telling them he won't lose, because he doesn't want them to go back to fighting over food. He struggles to get back up, but Tasuku apologizes for everything he said, explaining that he can understand how Shuhei feels, because he was also in pain when he was a child. But he mentions that he was saved by the people he loves, telling Shuhei they helped him become the person he is now. He doesn't understand why Shuhei never loved anything, but he mentions that he wants to help him, because he's suffering like he did in the past. Everyone's shocked hearing this, but Shuhei mentions that Tasuku won't be able to do anything to save his friends, because they can't find respectable jobs. He thinks they have no choice but to live as mercenaries, because they're struggling to feed themselves every day. But Kanji mentions that his manager needs more workers, and we learn that the other shops are also hiring, so Shuhei realizes that they can find jobs there. Kanji isn't sure if he can ever forgive him, but he knows that Shuhei needs help, and Tasuku notes that he's willing to do anything to help him. Shuhei is touched hearing this, so he decides to give up, and everyone can't believe he just admitted defeat. Shizuka thanks Kanji and Tasuku for saving her, and Niri wonders what he would need to do to shoulder as much as them. So Suo explains that he doesn't know, but he knows that they both went through hardships, thinking it's the reason why they're powerful. Shuhei tells his friends that he wants to change things so that they can all eat their fill, but he knows that they aren't on the right path. He explains that he killed all of his emotions because he couldn't find another way, and he apologizes for turning them into mercenaries. He notes that he has decided to go down the path Kanji and Tasuku showed him, and he asks them to join him because he still wants to be with them. They agree to go with him, reminding him that they all work as one, and he's glad that they still support him, but they're worried that they might screw up at work. Kanji tells them that nobody's perfect from the beginning, so it's normal for them to make mistakes as newbies, telling them they'll be okay. After that, Tasuku scolds Shizuka for going there, telling her she trampled on everyone's feelings. He knows that she was worried about Kanji and the others, but he reminds her that they also care for her, so they fought to protect her. Kanji tells them to calm down, reminding them that everything turned out well in the end, but she realizes that Tasuku is right, because she didn't have the resolve to trust everyone. She apologizes for her actions, and he wonders why she didn't tell them what she was thinking, telling her she can rely on them when she's suffering. He hugs her, telling her he loves her, and she thanks him for saving her. He tells her to appreciate Kanji for standing up to her, telling them they should get together, but the twins mention that they should go at their own pace. Everyone thinks they're a great couple, but Suo wonders why Sakura's romantic sensor isn't going off, because he usually blushes when he sees people in love. But he explains that he doesn't like how the Roppo Akiza fight, since they didn't care about winning or losing, telling them he can't stand seeing his friends get beaten up. But they just laugh at him, and Kanji tells him to keep his spirit, telling him what he just said is naive, but he just might make it a reality if he doesn't give up. Niri and Suo tease him, and he starts arguing with them, while Kanji notes that he's excited to see what kind of person Sakura becomes. Shuhei apologizes for everything, and mentions that he's looking forward to working with Kanji, promising to take full responsibility if his friends do anything. But Kanji wonders if they'll be okay, because the person who hired them to kidnap Shizuka is still at large, so Shuhei promises to talk to him. The boy with the strange tattoo appears, and he realizes that Shuhei failed, but he mentions that he still has a card he can use against Furin. Tasuku recognizes him and asks him what he's doing there, but he explains that he just goes wherever he wants, saying life is only a way to kill time until they die. Sakura wonders how Tasuku knows him, and he jumps down the roof, but he hurts himself, revealing that it's the first time he has jumped from the second floor. Sakura thinks he's messing with them, but he senses his demonic aura, and everyone prepares to take him on. So the boy reminds them that they just met, but he isn't afraid to throw down, and Shuhei mentions that he wants to talk to him alone. Tasuku realizes that the boy is the mastermind, and Sakura wonders who he is, so Tasuku reveals that he's a former Furin student named Endo. Niri and Suo recognize him as a living legend, but he mentions that he left Furin after a year, and Sakura wants to beat him up because he hired Shuhei to kidnap Shizuka. but he reveals that he recognizes Sakura because he watched him fight the members of Keel, so he knows how Sakura charged in alone. Endo thinks he struggled because of his friends, so he thinks Sakura doesn't belong in Furin, and he tells him to quit. But Neri is upset hearing this, telling Endo he doesn't know Sakura, and his friends charge in, but Endo dodges their attacks. Sakura joins the fight, and he pushes Endo back, but he explains that he wasn't mocking Sakura, revealing that he actually thinks highly of him. But he thinks Sakura is wasting his talents, explaining that he can't reach his full potential because his friends are holding him back. Endo thinks he's better off alone, but Sakura tells him to stop talking, telling him he can decide where he belongs. Endo decides to beat them up before he leaves, but Shuhei tells him to stop and notes that he's the reason why everyone's fighting, since Endo went there after he failed to complete his mission. He doesn't want Sakura and his friends to get involved, so he begs Endo to stand down, telling him he'll take full responsibility. But Endo laughs at him and tells him he looks pathetic, so Sakura and his friends prepare to take him on, but he suddenly accepts Shuhei's request. He reveals that he's working for an old man, but he thinks he can threaten him, so that nobody will mess with Shizuka again. Kanji wonders what he's up to, and Tasuka reveals that he has always been unpredictable, but he explains that he's no longer in the mood to fight. He starts walking away, and Sakura chases after him, but he stops as Endo calls him a kid. Tasuka tells him to stand back, and Endo is glad that he listened to his senior, reminding him that he's still a first-year student. After that, Sakura eats with his friends, but we see that he's still worked up, so Neri tells him to calm down. Shuhei apologizes for causing trouble, thinking he's the reason why Endo appeared, but Sakura tells him to stop apologizing because he isn't upset that he had to meet Endo. He explains that he's upset since he hates Endo as a person, and tells Shuhei it isn't his fault that he hates him, so there's no reason to apologize. As Shuhei tastes the food, he mentions that he's never eaten something so delicious before, so Tasuka recalls how he said he wasn't able to enjoy his life because he struggled to make ends meet. Tasuka asks him if there's something he wants to do, so he mentions that he wants to play video games, but he needs to save money before he can buy a gaming console. Shogo reveals that he brought games with him, so they start playing a racing game, and Shuhei gets last place, but he notes that he had fun. Kanji gives Sakura the controller, but he reveals that it's his first time, so Neri teaches him how to play the game, but Sakura loses 10 games in a row, so he becomes upset, and he mentions that he wants to keep playing until he wins. Neri continues to play with him, while Kanji asks Tasuku about Endo, so he reveals that he already told Yumiya about what happened. Kanji can't believe Endo is interested in Sakura because he never compliments anyone, and Kanji thinks they need to look out for him because he might make his next move. The next day, Furin's officials have a meeting on the rooftop, and Sakura wonders why he was told to go there. So Tasuku reveals that he told Yumiya what happened, and he summoned all of them. But Neri freaks out because the 4 kings and their lieutenants are all present, so he realizes that their incident was more important than he thought. Yumiya joins them, and he realizes that everyone's already there, but they tell him he's late, and they find it strange, because he's usually the first to arrive. He thanks them for coming, and gives them Koto's special sandwiches to eat during the meeting, because it's still early in the morning. Kotaro gives them cups for their coffee, but he crushes Sakura's cup before giving it to him, so he becomes angry. Yumiya tells Kotaro to stop being mean, so he fixes Sakura's cup, and Yumiya compliments him for being nice, but Sakura is still angry at him. Hiragi tells Yumiya to get to the main topic, and Neri prepares to report what happened yesterday, but Yumiya reveals that he already knows about it, because Tasuka told him everything. He explains that he wants to talk about Endo, but he needs to start with the history of Furin, so it's why he decided to gather everyone. Neri knows that Furin was united after Yumiya entered the school, and he mentions that the story is correct, but he notes that they left something behind when they first created Furin. He asks Neri how much he knows, so he starts telling everyone about Furin's history, revealing that Yumiya's group entered the school 2 years ago, when it was divided into factions. They used to fight among each other, but Yumiya's group defeated all of them and turned them into allies. After a year, they were able to unite Furin, which became the protectors of the town, and everyone's impressed by Neri's knowledge of the history. Yumiya mentions that his story is correct, but Hiragi knows it isn't true, and Neri realizes he's about to hear a story he's never heard before, so he starts taking notes. Yumiya asks him how much he knows about Endo, so Neri notes that he's famous because he's a living legend who created a faction of super brawlers. But unlike Yumiya's group, which gained allies through expanding their power, his faction was a small group of elites, which crushed every team that opposed them. Endo's group was said to be so brutal that they burned everything to the ground, so nobody wanted to mess with them, and we learn that they were the biggest obstacle to Furin's unification. Yumiya eventually defeated them and united Furin, but Endo's group decided to leave instead of joining them. Neri thinks they hold a grudge against Furin, so they want to get revenge, but Yumiya tells him it isn't the case, because they never act based on grudges. But he's convinced that they're acting with Furin in mind, so Neri is worried, but he thinks everything will be okay, because Yumiya's group defeated them in the past. But Yumiya tells him he's wrong, because Endo's group never rejected the unified Furin, revealing that they just abandoned it before the first year was over. Sakura recalls that the unification happened after the first year, so Neri realizes that they left before it happened, and Yumiya reveals that his group never defeated them. He explains that Endo's group wanted the old Furin, which was a chaotic place where the students fought every day, and Yumiya's group fought them multiple times, but there was never a clear winner. They fought the other factions, which became their allies, so Furin started to become peaceful, but Endo's group didn't like it, so they decided to leave. But they're still keeping the chaos of the old Furin within themselves, so they're like the shadow that was left behind, and Yumiya notes that they're becoming a threat to Furin once again. He's afraid that they want to revert Furin to how it used to be, so Neri is worried, but Sakura thinks it's perfect, because he wants the chance to fight them. He recalls that before he joined Furin, he wanted to become the #1 fighter, but he ended up making friends who care about him, so he now wants to protect them. He reminds everyone that it's their duty to protect what's dear to them, but Yumiya laughs at him, and notes that he's glad Sakura came to the town. He tells him to take care of Endo if they need to fight him, but he warns him to be careful, because Endo seems to be interested in him. Yumiya reveals that Endo never took an interest in him, and he mentions that they didn't fight before, but Sakura finds it strange, because he fought Endo's group several times. He reveals that he fought another legend in the group, who was far stronger than Endo, and he has never defeated him before. Neri can't believe such a person exists, wondering who Yumiya is referring to, so he reveals that the legend's name is Takeshi, and he's probably the strongest person in Furin's history. That evening, we see Endo walking in the streets, and he enters an alley, where he sees men on the floor. He realizes that Takeshi beat them up, and he mentions that he saw them when he wanted to light fireworks in the alley, so Endo thinks it's their fault for staying there. He wonders why Takeshi is piling them up, so he explains that he wants his fireworks to launch as high as possible, and they explode in the sky, as Endo mentions that they look cool. But Takeshi thinks they're lacking something, and notes that he wants them to go even higher, so he decides that he'll be needing more bodies to add to his pile. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.